minutes and everything. Basically, the way we have to vote now, we have to vote a certain way, or we have to start doing written minutes. So basically, when we vote now, we either need to do it like a roll call vote. It takes forever.
Yeah, hate it already.
Or, or we can, when you vote, like they can vote yay and nay, and then you can just like do like a recap of like, Haley, yay, Raoul, no, or whatever, like do like so does that make sense? Like you would say like, these 5 people, you have to say their names. Oh, it's what the law.
Okay.
You would have to either remember it or we just do the roll call and that's.
Or everybody can vote individually, but that also
takes time.
What's that?
Do you remember my name?
Yeah, I remember everybody's name. Yeah. All right. Just give me a second. We'll just
It's
going here.
we
have to do that for all of our meetings.
We started hearing stuff now that the Ethics Commission has gotten a lot more active in the public meeting space. We are realizing that number one, we're going to need to bring them to a board meeting to just do training, just so that we can hear it from the horse's mouth. And things are a little different, they just take a different take on stuff. And now the expectation is that we follow the direction of the Ethics Commission. And even if it's a little different, or maybe even a lot different than what we were advised to do before, that's what we need to do now.
Sounds like a job for Doge or something.
Yeah, well, it's like the only other option, right, is that like the board staff has to start doing written minutes again, which was a huge time commitment for them, and then also got us into some issues in the past.
Okay, I'm gonna get us back on track. Sorry, I apologize to everyone for being late. Andrew's okay when we're ready. Get started. Oh, okay, perfect. Hopefully we got the Doge comment on that.
Oh boy.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Joe Sullivan. I am the chair of the Board of Accountancy. I'm calling this public meeting of the State of Oregon Board of Accountancy to order. Today is Wednesday, December 18th, 2024, and it is 8:36 a.m. This meeting is being held in person at the board offices on 200 Hawthorne Avenue Southeast, Suite D 450, Salem, Oregon 97301. This meeting is being recorded. Zoom participation is also enabled. If you are participating in this meeting by Zoom, please be sure to mute your microphone and unmute only when you are called upon to speak. Please do not use the chat room for any discussions. Should any technical issues arise, the meeting will be paused until they are resolved. I'll now take a roll call of members and guests. We'll start with the people in the room first. And again, Joe Sullivan, board chair, and I'll just go around the table first.
Rob Valdivia, vice chair.
Haley Lyons, board member.
Megan Hartley, board member. Tanya Moffett, BOAC chair.
Jason Robinson, board treasurer.
Heidi Steiner, DAS.
Jeremiah Leopard, board staff.
Jason Orm, Laws and Rules Committee Chair.
Martin Piccioni, Executive Director.
Angie Hunt, board legal counsel.
Okay.
Adrian Barlow, board staff.
Quinn Stoddard, board staff.
Jerry McPherson, OSCPA.
Okay, and then I'll go on Zoom as I see them on the screen. I'll start with you, Adam.
Hi, Adam Alpenalp, Vice Chair of the OSCPA by Zoom.
Okay, thanks for joining us. Amanda.
Amanda Fells, OAIA by Zoom.
Okay, Logan.
Logan Steele, board member, present via Zoom.
Rachel.
Rachel Reardon, PwC, attending via Zoom.
Okay, thanks for joining. And it looks like that's everyone on Zoom. Is there anyone else that I missed? Andrew? That is everyone. Okay, perfect. All right, we've announced everybody here, so we'll just move on to item number 2, the agenda review and approval. I have in my notes kind of talk about the new motions, but I think we just discussed, so we can probably think I have a good understanding of that. So we'll just make sure we announce, or I'll try to announce each person's name, so we have that on record for how we're voting going forward. Sure. Yes.
If I may, this time from the staff, I have 2 requests for amendments to the agenda, in addition to any other amendments that may come from board members. You do have that on your chair agenda, but I don't want to just state them for the record. One is I would ask for item 21C, municipal roster ratification, to be removed There is nothing nefarious going on here. It just means that we don't have any new agreements to ratify. So we just forgot to take it off the standard order. And then the other piece is that we did at the very last minute yesterday, uploaded just late yesterday, receive another settlement agreement. So if the board's willing to consider it, I would like to add that settlement in the matter of case 2023-28 as item, hang on a second, it would be under 13. It would be the new item 13D. So to the three settlements that were already there, matter of 23-028 Orquist. So those two, one removal, one addition, will be the request from staff.
Okay. Perfect. Assuming everybody's okay with that, would I have a motion to approve the agenda with those amendments?
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
a motion, a second, any discussion?
Okay, and I think we're going to state for the records, just to make it really clear with that piece, that the second came from Jason Robinson.
Okay,
So
all
you,
right, a motion from Haley, a second from Jason Robinson. Sorry, this will take me time to get
Yeah.
used to.
Sorry,
And then
you can just do all those in favor and all those
Yeah.
opposed, and then you can say the names, or you can have.
how about we just say all those in favor and raise your hand and I'll
Or they
just,
have to actually say it.
okay, and say, aye,
Yeah.
and then I'll say your name, okay? Does
Sorry.
that work? So all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye, and then I'll,
Aye.
okay, so Raul says aye, Haley says aye, Megan says aye, Jason says aye, Logan says aye. Okay, those
Do we
opposed?
need to say their last names?
I didn't want to tell him.
Here, this is
Rather than you
really,
could do what, so what one of my boards was saying,
Okay.
like, right, so you call for a motion, you get a second, and then you just say roll call, and then Haley says aye, and you say your name,
Okay.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Yeah.
And then you go,
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So whatever
Start
you,
over.
Yeah.
whatever you do
So
as
you
we
can
work through
say,
this,
for the
please
record,
don't
and I'll
change
try to
your
get-
name in the middle of the board.
I was trying to do it quick, that didn't work.
Yeah.
All right, so we have a motion in a second, we have those on record.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye, roll call, right? Is
You
that-
don't even have to do all,
Roll
you can just
call.
roll call,
Okay,
right?
roll call. Okay,
Rob Olivia, vote aye.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, I.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
all right. And Joe Sullivan, aye. Okay. Those opposed? Hearing none. Abstentions, hearing none. Motion passes, all right. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's perfect.
okay, that was,
It's gonna be fun.
I'll try to get used to that quickly.
Well, and when we have more cases too, like, we can try and figure out a way to like group
Batch them.
actions together so that we're not having to, because that can get, I mean,
Perfect. Okay, moving on to item 3. So we have some introductions. Kind of Heidi, you just kind of announced yourself, but thank you for coming. And then we have a couple staff introductions too. So just want to take a moment and introduce yourself.
I'm Heidi Steiner. I am the new HR client agency manager and support the Board of Accountancy. I have over 30 years of state experience. I work primarily at Department of Forestry in HR. So I am just recently came over to DAX starting in September, and I'm really looking forward to working with the Board of Accountancy, a new role.
Well, thank you and welcome. And yeah, normally I'm on time and appreciate you joining us.
If I just may add one more thing to that, since Heidi will not be able to stay, and it kind of ties into something we're dealing with much later on the agenda around staff reports, but I just want to publicly acknowledge while she's here, is that Heidi is really supporting me a great deal with the staff transitions, and especially the implementation of the board's strategic goal around the deputy director position, training Andrew. So I'm not doing all of this alone. I'm getting a lot of help. Just want to say thank you for that. It's a huge blessing. I'll get into a little bit more detail when I do the staff report later, but I want to at least get the thank you in there while you're still here so you don't hear it later. So that's the other piece on Heidi.
Perfect. Well, thank you again. And yeah, and we just have a couple new staff introductions that we all haven't had a chance to meet yet. So
Yes, so we on November 1 actually achieved our milestone of achieving full staffing since our long history of, basically complete turnover on the licensing and basically all positions except for the Jeremiah's position, right? And so it took us a long time. It took us 2.5 years through, temporary, band-aiding stuff to really get back to normal. And so that that I'm not making this up, the last 2 staff that we hired, one on the October 27th is Nicole.
Hello.
Nicole, do you want to just say your full name and maybe 1 or 2 things about your?
Sure. My name is Nicole Kupine. I grew up in Canada. I actually only moved to the States a couple of years ago. I'm an engineering student and yeah, I feel like that's about it.
So but there's no evil plan here. I know that there's engineers here who later become accountants, but
yeah. Where are you studying engineering?
Sorry.
Where are you studying engineering?
Through Old Dominion University, they actually accepted all of my Canadian credits, which was
cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So that's great.
awesome. And then we have shortly thereafter on November 1 came Quinn. So Quinn is our new communications and compliance and communications specialist. Do you want to just say a couple of things, say your full name and kind of 1 or 2 things about your background?
Yeah, so my name is Quinn Stoddard. I'm the new compliance and communication specialist. I am an award-winning journalist from the Kaiser Times, and I'm really excited to be here. Probably a little out of my depth because I don't have an engineering or glad to continue to add depth to the team.
They'll still let you in the room. I can speak from experience.
Yeah.
All right.
So, well, welcome both of you. Thank you very much. All right, we'll keep moving. We're almost back on track already. So item number 4, review of public board summary. No motions needed here, but we have several meeting summaries from previous meetings. So any discussion or corrections needed?
And I really appreciate frankly, the reason you see so many here is both finally able to catch up to get us back to current state. And it is a consequence of having full staffing. So Quinn did a lot of work to help me get to this place. He's only been here a month and made a huge difference already. So couldn't have done it without him. And quite frankly, Jeremiah also carried a lot of the ball on these meeting summaries in the interim. There's just, I feel very supported by my team.
Right.
Any corrections, please let me know, even if it's after the board meeting, if discover, hey, wait a minute, it says I was there. I wasn't even there. Whatever that is, please let me know because it is important that we did our best to try to keep this as accurate as possible.
Okay, perfect. So any other discussion?
One final, I think it would actually be really good for the board to know that while our minutes are our official record, so we are on the website right now already posting, the full recordings of our committee meetings, of our board meetings. I do intend, just from a transparency and public access standpoint, to start publishing these summaries as well, because it will be easier for the public to kind of see at a high level what goes on at a meeting and kind of what the motions were, rather than doing a whole video thing. So I do plan to kind of go above the minimum that the Ethics Commission has set, and on a go forward basis with the board, I might do it on a go backward basis. Start publishing these types of summaries for our stuff and publish them next to the links for the video meetings. I just want you to be aware.
Okay, perfect. I think we're ready to keep moving. We'll go on to item number 5, public comment. So I'll just ask if there are any members of the public who wish to comment, please raise your hand in the room or use the Zoom raise hand feature. If I call on you for comment, you'll be permitted to address the board for a maximum of 3 minutes, and staff will unmute you so you can speak. As chair, I reserve the right to end your comment early and have staff mute you if your comment does not pertain to the authority given to this board by the legislature. to regulate the CPA profession and public accountancy firms in this state. So with that, is there any public comment? Not hearing any, so we'll keep moving. Next, we'll go to item number 6, the report of the OSCPA.
Thank you.
Sure.
I just want to let everybody know I would not be here if I were sick, but I was tangling with holiday decorations and glitter cloud. And so anyway, a coffee jag, so I'm just trying to be careful today. So more as a courtesy, so nobody worries if you see me taking cocktail. Right, thank you. It's great to be here, and just as we move through December and into this next section of the year, very busy time right now. Looking at things, the board of directors worked on their strategic plan this fall, and so we'll be putting a little polish on that. So we'll be finalizing that at our January meeting coming up. Elections for OSCPA just finished, and it's more of an elections process, not elections. So pleased to report that Megan Kurz, and many of you know Megan from a few of her board activities. She's on the board as a director. She'll be moving up to vice chair. Adam Alpinall will be moving up to chair-elect, and then Gary will come up to chair. So thrilled with the outcome of that. And we also have 3 wonderful new directors that will be coming in too. So looking at a few of the other things along the way, year-end busy CPE time, you know, obviously getting ready for our tax season, that sort of thing, corporate filing as well. But also we have our winter governmental conference coming up. We've been wishing out FinCEN training, trying to help everybody. And based on that, I may as well just go right into that. So FinCEN with beneficial ownership interest, BOI. I've been posting a recent on Bridge just with the newest update. So December 4th, the U.S. District Court in Eastern Texas placed in a nationwide preliminary injunction. And on December 6th, there was a formal appeal, Department of Justice through the 5th Circuit Court. And I've just heard from my colleagues nationally at AICPA that today there is expectation that movement will occur in the U.S. House of Representatives with a draft, and that's filing a delay until 1/1/26. The societies around the country, and I say jurisdictions, I'm trying to teach everybody it's not CPA, state CPA societies because they're territories and EC, but the jurisdictions, the societies have been working, you know, to advance out our support to AICPA's efforts as well. Coincidentally, on December 4th, we had just sent off nationally the letter to the folks in DC, Treasury, et cetera, with a sign-on for all of the CPA societies as well as AICPA. I thought, well, that was perfect timing. So much for that, but we're still working through all of that. We're hopeful that there would be that filing delay until 1/1/26. It has to go through the House. Then it has to go through the Senate, and of course has to be signed into law. But just giving everybody a heads up, I've had a lot of calls from members. The first thing that I do is, and it's kind of changed a little bit with some of the carriers, but I send folks off to their professional liability carrier as the starting point. And that has worked really well too, because, you know, the larger carriers have legal counsel as well. So people have been able to get some help, and I've had some positive feedback on that. So I know everybody will be really happy when this is moving along. The numbers kind of depends on what you read. I kind of look at this and say, when you think about 40 million plus businesses, so you can hear 42.5, 45, 43, whatever, but I think in terms of 40 million plus, then I also think in terms of about 10% have filed. And that's just, it kind of helps us keep track of where we are a little bit better than trying to quote those numbers when they vary depending on what you're reading. So anyway, that's what's coming up there. Hoping for some positive movement through there. Thank you, Martin, and to the board for the update, professional issues update on December 5th. And you guys are probably tired of me saying thank you, but I always feel like you never can say thank you enough. We've had a lot of really good positive outreach to members, and just, I have, people call me a lot of things because there's comfort in that because I'm a grandpa. And I really have had some heartfelt comments. So thank you to you for all the work you're doing. One person is like, this is going to change my life. All these things that are happening. How do you take that to the bank? So anyway, thank you to everybody for that. And the last thing I would just, but it's December, coming to the Board of Accountancy meeting. For many years, Stu Morris was at the table. And when he finished his 9-year term, three-year term, so 9 years, plus had 2 more years, so 11 years. And then Al came on and, Stu was sitting in the back of the room with me for those 3 years. And I know he would itch sometimes over all of that because he was used to being at the table. But I have to say, I can't think of the holidays without thinking about Stu and, all these many contributions as well. But I just want to take a moment to, honor Stu and, thank all of you for the opportunity for having those experiences. And the man loved Virginia peanuts, so, never see a can of those again without thinking of Stu. So
I was thinking about that on my way down here. It was, I remember he brought those to the board meetings every year and those were great.
Really good, I missed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry. Perfect. We keep moving here. Item number 7, report of the OAIA. So Amanda, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. So OAIA, with us here, it's CPE season. So we are in full swing there. That is going well. We have some updates coming in January to kind of wrap that up before we get into filing season. And then we kind of take a little bit of a hiatus, right, during tax season and then kind of resume over the summer. We are currently in the process of revamping our website, which is a fun and challenging process, doing a whole rebuild. So kind of exciting changes coming there. And then we're going to be engaging in a rebranding to kind of update, give our organization a bit of a facelift and kind of hone our marketing message moving forward. So exciting things coming here into the new year that we're trying to kind of get moving. So that's the report there. And I just wanted to say, thank you to Sherry for the comment about Stu. He was also a dear member of our board. And so he was very involved in all aspects, right? many layers of our industry. And he is dearly missed. So yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate the updates. Let's see. I just have in my notes, I think what we're going to do is the next item is the pipeline committee report. But Jason, I think you've got limited time today, correct?
I do. Mr. Chair, I'm good till 10:30. So
yeah, well, just to make sure, we keep you on schedule. What we'll do is we'll skip item 8 for now, and we'll move right into the work session so we can make sure that we can have your contributions there. And so we'll start with 9. We'll come back to item A, the pipeline committee report. We'll start with item 9A, and then after that, we're going to jump to 9B,
and that's also meant for while you're still here, because it's all the legislative.
So we're going to do that, and maybe we'll get you some found time there. So
thank you.
Yeah. All right. So Jason Robinson, 9A, the discussion of the private equity and the alternative practice structures.
So we no longer have a QC committee.
Yeah.
But I like the direction the board's going with the guidance and without using any other words, hand-holding that we are proposing in a lot of our areas. We've always been the bouncer at the door for our CPA candidates, but I think encouraging the newer CPAs that have their 5-year tenure and having information out there for them to be available to start their own programs in private industry would be beneficial for us for the pipeline. So encouraging those MOUs to still come in, those pieces where like Cambia has a great example that was given by Martin in the materials, having that as a document that we can show newer people, here's how you run a program, I think would be beneficial for us. So not cutting them off and saying, don't worry, we're no longer taking those in, but encouraging them to continue to send those in to us. And then being a repository to give out to others that are trying, because who here has ever certified a CPA? Sweet. I thought it'd be a lot less than that. So but I know there's a fear out there for a number of my CPA friends that I've hung out with, everything, that have more than 5 years experience. They really are hesitant to go out on a limb and sign off on somebody and dive into those programs. At a CPA firm, it's the norm. But in private industry, it is not the norm. So I think us being an encouraging, helpful hand in that regard would be beneficial for our pipeline.
So just to be clear, what you're proposing then, kind of one more level of detail is that the prior requirement was to send those reports into the QC. Since we no longer have the QC, the proposal is to keep it going and to basically send it to staff so that we can essentially report it to the board directly.
Yeah. So we would know of any new incoming programs and kind of be abreast of any help that they'd be asking for.
And then the only other thing I remember, and I know I'm missing something else, but I know that in that there was an email that came through from one of the really engaged members named Jim Bartos.
Yes.
I think he's over at DOR, if I remember correctly. And one of his questions on the process side was if we're going to continue to use those MOU, no, actually that's the reports. Sorry, never mind, that's different. The MOUs are different from the reports, right? I think he was asking whether we want to do that we only submit the MOUs like if they change.
Yes.
Right? I think that was one of his other questions, I think.
Because they normally annually submit the MOUs and we would be putting language out there that you can submit your MOUs if you change your program. So that would be my suggestion. Because I would like to continue that communication with the private industry folks. So do you need to make a motion or?
What are we looking for here? I was just gonna say, I like the idea. I just had a real life example come up this week where a client controller at a private company reached out, passed the exam. She's super bright and doesn't have a CPA to sign off on her. So, I mean, it's something that we need to work on and create a pathway and continue to create opportunities for those people. So I like the idea. Any other? And so, yeah, that was something Martin and I was going to talk about offline anyway, but it's just a good example of this happens a lot.
Yeah.
So any other comments, questions from people? And by the way, I accidentally jumped to 9C. I meant to go straight to 9A for Jason Orm, but just another sidebar there, but
This is on our toes. I don't think we need a motion on that. I think this is just process stuff.
okay. Yeah, I mean, I think it looks like I see a lot of nodding heads, so I won't do a roll call. We're not doing motions, but I think everyone agrees with what you're saying, Jason, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, so with that then, we will go to 9A, which is the continued discussion of private equity and ACE. Jason Orm.
The other Jason.
Yeah, the other Jason.
A little bit of history with the last LRC meeting. We spent 2 hours on this. To prepare us for that, Angie spent probably more than 2 hours researching legislative history of how we got to where we are with 51% ownership requirement, CPA ownership requirement that's currently in statute. She also found a scholarly article that went through the history in general of CPA ownership, which was very interesting. I want to summarize that for the board, if I might, because I think it's good background for what you are going to make some decisions on. Doing what I do for a living, which is tax, really has only been in the CPA world for about 75 years. CPA world has been around much longer than that. It's odd to me that I have served half of the time that CPAs have been doing tax returns. This is something about my advancing years, perhaps. But when things started, CPA firms were 100% owned by CPAs, period. That worked. And then there was a shift to supermajority, and then another quick shift to 51%. And that all happened several decades ago. And then it stuck there. And the reason for that, based on the history we've been able to find, is public protection. That's the purpose. And the statute, as it's there now, never thought about private equity. I mean, we never thought about it. So now we are in an interesting situation. I think I mentioned this at the board, but this is how we started our committee meeting, to start the discussion, because really it centers around what is best for public interest. And that is an open question. So right now, with how our current Oregon rules are being interpreted, Tanya and I can start a firm only doing tax work. That's all we're doing. Staffed with CPAs. We have to register with the board as a firm because it's owned by CPAs. Now, Tanya and I get out and we sell to Andrew and Martin. Exact same staff, exact same client base, but the question at hand is, it appears, because of how statute is drafted, that firm would no longer be required to be licensed with the Board of Accountancy and not be governed by the board. We started this discussion at the last board meeting too, and it brings up some pretty interesting questions about, they decide to retire. Now, who's responsible for the underlying records? The individual CPAs. If there's a problem in the firm and discipline needs to be provided, doesn't go to the firm, goes to the individuals rather than individuals and the firm. So we have groups that have done this. To use Martin's term, cows are out of the barn. They're out in the field and just they're out, and we know that. And they've read current statute and applied it, just like I apply statute every day, and come to their own conclusions about how it works. After a 2-hour discussion, here's where the Laws and Rules Committee wound up. For your consideration, we support maintaining 51% ownership. We support maintaining that requirement. We don't want to make any last minute changes. We don't want to try to jam something into the 25 legislature. We've got 2 major bills already. We don't want to distract from those because they are significant. One with a licensure and the other with the funding of the scholarship. So this could it happen in the 26th legislature, the short session? Maybe. But really, this is probably a 27 legislative concept. We recommend for continuing to register public accounting firms providing non-attest. It's different than the alternative practice structures that are out there right now. We also recommend, and we do not have an answer yet, some sort of method to welcome the cows back into the barn, to use Martin's vernacular, without penalizing the cows for being out of the barn, but to welcome back in the barn. We didn't even get there because the practice structure issue is so large. It would mean clarifying what it means to practice public accounting in our state, which would be a statutory clarification. So I come to the board with the recommendations for your consideration. 51% to practice public accounting. Firm ownership to be a CPA, public accounting firm, 51% ownership by CPAs. Recommend that we take a look at the legislative piece and defining what public accountancy is in the state. I'm going to add one more thing about that. Public accounting, Megan, you're not a partner, as I recall. Out there, public statements and doing publicly traded companies. And we think about that, and what Megan does is protect the public by signing off on those reports, and you are signing those reports. And she's protecting the public with public markets and everything else. Absolutely, 100%. In my career, I'm guessing I have signed probably 10,000 tax returns that are submitted to governmental agencies. And they are submitted in accordance and with best attempts, reading rule, to comply with public policy so that the appropriate amount of tax is collected to fund the government. That seems to me to also be in the public interest. That is the question the board needs to wrap its head around. Notice I didn't make a statement there other than lay out the facts. This is not my decision, it's yours. But think about that as you go through this process. And again, we would like your permission, your direction, better word, to say yes and figure out how to gather the alternative practice structures back in a way that's not punitive, if that's what you decide is the appropriate thing. We'd like your direction to say yes, find a way to do that, and would love some ideas if you have. That's the summary report from 2 hours with the LRC. Amazing ideas. And Amanda was there. I mean, we went round and round, and Amanda, I think, will shake her head and around and round and round this. It is a very, very difficult topic. So I now lay it to your feet.
Mark, thank you. So just to inform the discussion a little bit more. So Jason took on what we did at the LRC. I want to add just a couple more things before, our chair opens up for discussion that I found out at the national level. One is a little bit older. The other stuff is like literally just from within the last week. One is that the AICPA Peak Committee took this issue up, I believe, in November sometime. They were expected, they're focusing more on the independence type questions with respect to that kind of private equity and APS structures pose. They were expected to expose an exposure draft in terms of what the AICPA's perspective was. They were supposed to be the first ones out of the gate nationally with some kind of a, here's what we think from the AICPA side. They did not get there. The plan was to do an exposure draft at the November meeting. They had to pull that back because they could not come to a consensus. So they, in effect, set up a process where essentially they're circling back to try to figure out what it is that they should bring back to that committee for future consideration to expose. So they're struggling with this too on the AICPA side. On the NASBA side, I think the older news is that they've been asked to do this work on the regulatory side for years and have not done so. We know that the new incoming, well, no longer incoming, the now chair of the NASBA board has said she really wants to pivot away from the licensure and mobility pathway piece and resolve that so that she can address the private equity issues. She said that's her biggest priority, right? What I'm now hearing just over the last week from the executive directors, number one, I can see the temperature changing, right? Because quite frankly, in our meetings, it was really almost all about pathways and mobility, right? And maybe private equity is an afterthought for the first part of the year. It's now starting to shift because people are really struggling And what I want to emphasize is that two things. There is no, it's really important to distinguish between, on the one hand side, exactly what you reported, that there is unity when it comes to CPA ownership requirements at the 51% level, where the difference is, and this is really, really important, is that right now, for reasons that have nothing to do with the private equity discussion and nothing to do with APS, jurisdictions are all over the place in terms of whether they require non-attest firms to even register, because a lot of them get there in very different ways. Some of them are like us, they have a broad definition of public accountancy, and pretty much the non-attest space is required to register. In other jurisdictions, if you don't hold out as a CPA firm and use different titles, there is already a lot of places, quite frankly, that includes one of our neighbors, the state of Idaho, where essentially under certain circumstances, if you operate in a non-attest space, you don't have to register as a firm, right? So we have ownership requirements that if it's a CPA firm, there is that unity around that 51%, but that unity already starts to break if you look around the country around how far do these registration requirements go. And the only honest thing that I can tell you is that on the attest side, there is unity that those firms have to register and do that 51%, which is also why PE hasn't really tried to touch that, at least much so far. But we have a much more messy situation on the other side, which also means that as I'm now listening to my executive directors around what's going on in their states, not only are we not alone that we don't have unity, right? But the opinions vary widely, right? There are some that are exactly in that space that Jason just reported out where the LRC is at, right? Kind of basically hold your ground. And others that because of their history of not really being as active as we have been on the non-attest side in terms of requiring registration, there are some jurisdictions that seem to be quite comfortable with, well, this isn't the attest side. We don't really want to fight that battle because we in this jurisdiction haven't historically fought that battle for reasons that have nothing to do with the private equity piece. So we're kind of in a messy situation nationally, no consensus, there is no clear line in terms of where jurisdictions are at in terms of the registration requirements at the firm level. And there is no agreement yet on any kind of a national solution. So the national picture there is pretty messy, but I also want to emphasize that we're not out there on an island, right? There are quite a few jurisdictions that are, if you will, hardcore the way we are, saying, hey, you're a CPA firm, you need to register. And for them, this discussion is really hard, right? As it is for us, right? So I just wanted to add that on just to try to clarify as we figure out kind of what we want to do next, that while there is unity on the 51%, beyond that, it gets really, really messy at a national level because there is no unified approach right now. So I hope that helps context perspective.
Jason, thank you for the summary and the additional comments, Martin. So just open it up for discussion. Anyone from the board have comments, questions? Jason?
From a tax perspective, are we stepping on toes by trying to change things that are not necessarily in our wheelhouse?
Well, right now, we're not changing anything, so not exactly.
I know, but if it's consideration like bringing the cows back in, is that going to upset or is that going to go against?
Well, right now we haven't done anything with the cows, and I'm trying not to look at Sherry when I say this, but I have to clarify that the meaning of the term cow is and has apparently evolved. I talk about cows, I meant the national cows. At OSCPA, I learned that cows are California, Oregon, Washington, so that's not what I'm talking about. they have a different term, so I'm talking about the national cows. But yeah, basically, but Jason, to be really clear, it's a great question. We are, like other jurisdictions, essentially in suspense. We haven't changed anything. And I think, Andrew, please help me with this. I think right now, we have essentially two things happening. One is that we have two national firms that were very public in their announcements, right? That basically have simply sent us a letter, and that you've had those in prior packets, that says, this is what we've done, and this part over here is no longer public accounting firm, right?
Yes.
In essence, we haven't responded to their quote unquote response, because really responding to them would require us to know what the board's response is intended to be. So we're simply right now doing nothing with those firms. And then we have, I think, one application on our desk from a non-national firm, an Oregon firm that's now a regional firm, that's essentially trying to register with an APS structure, where we have been unable to move that forward because we can't do it under our existing. We can only say, hey, you can continue with the attest side, but the non-attest side entity that you're trying to set up, we can't, under the current laws and rules, we're not permitted to move those through a registration process. So right now we haven't changed anything, but we're holding kind of in suspense because we don't know what to say to either one scenario. Does that answer your question, Jason, in terms of what where we're currently at?
Just wondering if we need to, going forward, need to partner with another smaller agency. So.
Okay. What Jason is referring to here is that in Oregon we have, and this is a conversation that I have had with my counterpart at the Board of Tax Practitioners, because at the personal tax return level, right, Oregon is one of, I think, 5 jurisdictions that requires licensure. So if you're not a tax attorney, not an attorney licensed to do this stuff, if you're not a CPA, then not for business tax returns, or personal tax returns, Oregon has a licensure requirement, right? So if that's one of the other kind of really interesting pieces here, is that if you now have an entity that says, oh, this is no longer a public accounting firm, we're now in this non-attest space, right? They actually would have to figure out whether they might have to, if there is personal tax returns that is part of that work, they would actually have to become regulated by our colleagues at the Board of Tax Practitioners, which, quite frankly, is not sure whether the board would be excited about that if it looked like a duck and walked like a duck and quacked like a duck until yesterday, and now they say they're a beaver, but now that beaver is coming. Sorry, Logan. Now that beaver is going over to the tax board to be regulated as a tax board entity. I'm not saying that they actually would be excited about that. I don't think they're seeking that out, but it's an unanswered question. It's like, so I'm not even sure that they've thought about that, but that's, I think, what you're referring to.
Yeah. So, good question.
And one more thing that I think Amanda pointed out during our meeting, Martin sets up his own firm and all he's doing is business tax returns.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Not covered by Board of Tax Practitioners in Oregon, as I understand it.
Right.
Okay.
Because they're individual only.
Yeah.
So now they're unregulated.
Unregulated. Yeah. That's what I was thinking. It's like, well, then where's that fine line? And do we need to work with another agency to make sure that that's covered? So.
Now, that's a separate issue of that the area of business tax returns does not have a straightforward licensure requirement in the state of Oregon, right? So we don't know if that was intended or not, but that's a bit of a weird one once you make the decision that you have that requirement at the personal tax return level.
The other, probably more important piece is, what's the incentive for the cows to come back in the fence?
Well, we'd have to change the law.
I find it hilarious that firm is like, please regulate me. I don't think if anyone.
I know, I was wondering the same thing.
Yeah. Okay.
But we said no, actually, right now.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
It's in limbo.
they have to be regulated by us. Like, don't they have to register as a firm?
But they can't.
Well, I know, but that's my point. So I don't think they're saying like, please regulating me. I think they're saying, I'm trying to follow the law, which I believe says I need to register my firm, but I can't register my firm because I don't have this 51%. Therefore, I'm everything, they're staring down the barrel of a tax season where they really shouldn't be doing any work because they're not registered as a firm.
Mhm.
So we have this, and so for people who are trying to do the right thing and comply, they're like,
Mhm.
and so but then these national firms are like, we don't need, that doesn't apply to us. When it's like,
But it is a real catch-22.
well, it is, and that's what I'm trying to be clear of. I'm trying to understand in my mind if I have that.
Firms, and it's a catch-22 for us. They're at
100%.
trying to figure out what do I tell my staff.
Okay, sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to cut you off.
Well, I cut you off.
No, please.
So
The double cut.
Good job.
So I think what is coming out of Laws and Rules as a proposal is that we are going to just leave people in limbo for the next couple of years. And what's the appetite for that among?
I just want to point out one thing.
Please.
I am interrupting you and I apologize. The interesting thing when I was doing this legislative history on this whole thing of like looking at how it came down and, we went from 100% to 60 something and 51. And when it came down to 51, one of the things that was part of that legislative history that was a part of this whole public conversation was that what they were saying was that change was to allow alternative business structures in, right? So the whole theory of saying like, you can still use an alternative business structure, but they can only own, 40% of the firm or whatever, as long as it's less than 51%. I'm sorry. You guys do math, you know what I mean? The other way. Yeah. So like, that was the whole point, right? Like that, and it was literally part of that history of them saying like, this does allow for that. If it's, and I don't know how these things actually work in practice, but I thought that was just a very interesting fact of like,
right.
That was the whole reason we came down from.
And it overlaps with our ESOP discussion, right? Because we've already discussed as a board that on the ESOP side, we're fine with allowing those in the door as long as we don't breach the 51%.
Right. Which that's tricky too.
Right, but the people that are gonna do that is totally limited unless you get above that.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I would, like, why would you even consider it unless you're trying to get 100? But in my opinion.
Primary matter at hand, it sounds like.
But I mean, that's where I would go. I'd go
Meaning a
S corp, 100% owned
100
by an ESOP, and you pay no tax. Be awesome.
The primary
That's
matter, it
how
sounds
I'm-
like came
that's
down.
how
to,
I'm wired, so.
Like just public protection. That's what it feels like. I mean, that's like on my pros and cons, that's like where you all ended, sort of making your recommendation.
And we looked at it and said, that is what this board is about, is public protection. And you'll notice the recommendation is soft. We came back with okay, here's where we're going. Do you like that? If so, tell us to keep going. If you don't like that, redirect us.
Yeah.
I think it's a good stance because so again, CPAs are all about the money and they know there's a lot of money to be had in private equity. So they're not gonna let this drop and they're gonna push for something more lax. They're gonna wanna leave the cows out in the field. Us taking a soft stance and kind of figuring out a way to do this in the next 2 years, I think is a good strategy for us to see how it starts to play out nationally. I
Well,
don't think we
but
should
can you
leading
take a
edge.
soft stance? What is the soft stance then in the interim? Like, I guess you just leave people
There is
sort
no
of
soft
like, yeah, just leave people like, well,
We can
whatever you
still
want to
regulate
do.
the tax returns by the individual CPAs that firm puts out.
Right.
So we still do have jurisdiction.
Yeah, the CPAs don't, yeah.
So
I guess I don't even think I think it's a soft stance, and I super appreciate all the work that you guys did, and the history is really helpful. And I think to me, from a public protection standpoint, so let's say everybody wanted to play by all the rules and interpreted them all the same way, right? What could have happen is say, my firm becomes a private equity owned and Joe's firm becomes private equity owned. Now we are no longer able to prepare any tax returns because we don't do it right. And we didn't create our management services agreement correctly to get all the money where it needs to go. But we now can no longer prepare tax returns and we take a large swath out of who's providing those services to the public in Oregon. That's a problem to me, first of all, if people were going to comply. The alternative is that people just say, these are the rules. I'm supposed to register my firm. I can't because I'm not owned 51%. I'm still going to practice and continue to do all of this work. We don't like that either. And so there's like.
But are they doing it under a firm name? Can they do it
Yes.
individually as a CPA?
Well, I mean, they've created this entity that is supposed to be the tax entity that's owned 100% or 90% or whatever percent, more than 51 by private equity and some by the CPAs likely. And so they are a firm that are saying we are now, it's, and then there's the naming thing where so I'm going to have Haley Lyons Audit Firm and Haley Lyons Tax Firm. But before I was just Haley Lyons Firm. And now I've got both, and my audit firm or my tax firm can't do the tax work that we're going to tell people we can do under the rules that we currently have.
Yeah.
But the individual tax practitioners are beholden to.
Just on the 1040 side.
Yeah, not on the
1040
business side.
Yeah,
They're
1040
beholden
side.
to the-
By the way, what you're pointing out is not an exaggeration. So there are plenty of APS examples where literally the only difference, and think about this from public standpoint, right? Is that you have the name XX, Inc. and XX, LLP, and the public is supposed to understand that one of them is a regulated entity and the other one is not.
Yeah.
One is a CPA firm, the other one is not. It's messy.
Yeah. And then the practitioners within that are dropping their CPA designation on all of their things because that's how they're like getting around it.
Yeah, two things to try to keep this moving. I'm curious, Sherry or Adam, is the OSCPA kind of discussed this at length, or is there any kind of anything coming out of your conversations?
Not yet. Well, it's been discussed at council, there. We have our meeting coming up, so I don't have anything to report to you other than we have itchiness. But, being on the Laws and Rules Committee as a committee member, I mean,
Yeah,
I have a lot to talk about with our board now, so.
Yeah.
I worry, I'm gonna be blunt, just looking at it from a layperson standpoint and from a long view, I'm itching because it's not gonna be. I don't think we have adequate time to prepare for 2025.
Well-
2026, we're stuck, and 2027 seems like a long way away. And I think about, how many conversations that I've been privy to with, like sole practitioners saying, okay, and that's the one that caught me at first. It's like when I first started realizing how deep it was going, I've been approached and, forming with a bunch of sole practitioners and into this entity. And I think, what is this gonna look like in 2 years?
Yeah.
I mean, 2 years is a long.
There's gonna be a ton of cows out.
Yes.
on the field. I mean, like,
Yes.
yeah.
Because silence is acceptance.
Thank you for bringing that back up, because I was gonna try to steer us back to the point Jason brought up initially, and it's like, we're not gonna, or at least in my position, we're not gonna endanger what we've done for 2025 by trying to slam this in there, right?
Yeah.
And
I agree.
so normally someone said 2027, that would make me cringe, right? But I don't think it's a really bad option to try to add this onto something.
Well, and not even that, but just like adequate time to figure it out. It's so complex.
Not, I would highly recommend we do not.
Yeah, I don't know that we would come up with, the thing is, I don't know that we'd come up with the solution.
And then just to create, be the contrarian a little bit, I'm a little less worried about the whole public safety thing than other people in the room, because individual CPAs are still bound by our professional standards. Alternative practice structures already exist. People find ways around them through the use of multi-tiered structures. We talked, Jason, last time you were here, you talked about corporate practice of medicine. I've helped clients around that.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Do you ever understand your medical bills? Who the heck is this company? Who's billing me? This happens every day in what we do. We have really good attorneys that figure these structures out to get around it anyway. So I think it is a complex issue. And then we think of a solution, it will immediately find a workaround, is my opinion on it. So
what's been on my mind too is, I mean, it was a very robust conversation at Boston Rules. And it made me reflect upon these other national conversations like being at council and so forth. And PE's been on the council. It's come up in topic, for professional updates for a long, long time. What worries me about jumping out right now, although I hate that I'm saying 2027 is probably better, because I worry about the unintended consequences. When AICPA and NASBA, with much deeper resources than we have, they walk out, let's just say for AICPA, walk out of the meeting and they don't have a clear direction on it. I mean, that's not very comforting for us. And I would worry about all of a sudden, and we've dealt with unintended consequences, right? Trying to refix something could be more painful than a slight delay. I think about also, when members call me about stuff, and then I work very collaboratively with the people, I know we're not just out of my lane, right? They're worried about doing things right. They don't want to jeopardize their license, and that's, when people are looking at that, they're not talking, when they call me, they're not talking about a firm license. And I'm not saying that's not important, but it's that, education, CPA, or, CPA exam, experience, and then career path, right? Nobody wants to mess up their livelihood. And we kind of got that a little bit earlier, just talking about people signing up for industry. And if you think about that at the time, Jason, I was like, oh my gosh, that is another unintended consequence that came up all those years ago when folks could go directly into industry. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm like, maybe the profession didn't quite, kind of look at that solidly enough either. So, sorry, I hope that's not too much, but.
If I might, one more thing to think about. The PE deals that are being done now, Joe, you know this much, much better than I do, but 5 years are gonna flip them.
Yes.
And that's just,
Yeah.
so,
I work in the PE world every day.
yep, this is your world, so they're gonna flip them. So now I've been working for one of the PE firms. I've been preparing tax returns. I've been careful not to use CPA on anything, and yet every time I sign a power of attorney for the Internal Revenue Service, it's CPA, and that's how I practice before the service. Every time I renew my P10. So now the PE firm sells. Am I responsible for all the client records? Who's responsible for the client records?
And this question is actually coming up now already. I don't want to name the name of the firm, but one of the very publicly announced PE APS pieces that was out there earlier this year has been reported to be hitting the wall and in significant trouble. So we're going to see very soon how on a rather large scale, but plan B looks like if that thing dissolves again.
Well, and when you're talking about small firms or sole practitioners coming together, through PE for all of a sudden firm, and you have those folks retiring, I mean, I think that size, to me, feels even more complicated than a larger entity.
And I posed that question. I don't have an answer for it, but I've sat at board meetings, not in your chairs, but listening, where from a compliance standpoint, I still remember one that the board did where a man who was having significant health issues was no longer thinking clearly, sold his practice. Makes sense. Broker who was helping him was the one who should have been in trouble, didn't tell him that he had requirements to notify his clients. And he was before the board because he hadn't notified some clients that his records got transferred. And the board agonized about it because here was this man who was in significant health issues, but he's violated some of the laws under which we practice, and the board had to do something. You're going to have more of that come down the pipe. And I have no idea what it looks like, and I do not know the answer. But I believe that that's out there. And if it's not, fabulous. I would love that answer, but I think that's out there. So what would you like us to do?
All right, any other comments? Logan, any thoughts?
No, I'm happy to, with the general position, the 51% rule, that makes a lot of sense to me. It, like, I don't know about everybody. Do we have from Jason, do we have a clear understanding? Like, what are like the specific questions we have to try to answer? So there's the where tax fits in, I think seems to be a prominent one, right?
Where tax and consulting fit in is prominent.
Yeah. And do we distinguish between tax and consulting? Right. I think that's an open question in my mind right now.
In consulting, I feel like the question of public protection gets much grayer. Like, I mean,
Greater than signing my name to a tax return, signed under penalties of perjury.
well, yeah, just like have the impact on the public of consulting work that we do, I think is less. than
Oh,
the
the impact of the consulting work is less on the public. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
And and also another point, I think, correct me, and this might be an Angie question. It seems to me like with the way that our rules are written, these APS firms, they're technically not in compliance. And would that be a correct statement?
There's no clear answer there necessarily, right? There are probably arguments that could be made either way. But that also depends on what the board wants, right? So, I think it's like I said, like that was the intent of the law, right? When it was done back in 1999 was to say that 51%, and that would include your ability to use. And they call it an alternative business structure, but I'm assuming it's the same thing.
So we would effectively, for the next 2 years, not respond to anyone asking to register in this situation that we have one of right now, or anyone who sends a letter saying, I'm not registering. We would just be silent. And then what, if anything, happens within one of those?
I feel like that might be a different question that we might want to get some legal advice on how to address those like separate parts, just because that could be a bigger, but I think probably more so what the decision that needs to be made today, right, is do you want, it sounds like generally you guys don't want to push forward for anything to happen on the legislative change. So right now we're looking at is like, if we wanted to clarify this, right, and we want to make it cleaner in our statute that either you can use this structure or you can't. If you want to do either one of those things, do you want that to happen as soon as possible? And which way, right? Make it so that it's like, so basically it was sort of like looking at like, do we want to rework the statute so it's very clear that you can have an APS structure, or do we want to rework the statute that it's very clear that you can't?
And I think we've said no on the short term aspect of that.
Yeah, the short term part, right? But then looking at it like, and I don't know what the realistic if there's any choice of trying it in 2026 at all. I don't know what that
there's a lot of variables around that. It depends on the session. It depends on the governor's office position on, do they allow state agencies to do it, which depending on what the answer there is means, if the answer there is no, it means it can only happen through the society side. And then it requires getting a carrier, which is always a very, very small needle to thread in a short session because there's very strict limits on the amount of bills.
So I guess the board could like say
Makes a
like,
lot of sense, but yeah.
we can go either way, right? Say whichever way you want to go, and then direct the LRC to be ready for if 2026 can happen.
I think we need to have an answer first.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like first, yeah, first you gotta figure out which way you want to go, right? Like, do you want to create the statute in a way that makes it very clear that you can, or do you want to make the statute in a way that's very clear that you can't?
Could I ask you as maybe one, since I think the first clear outcome that I'm hearing is that we are all in agreement that we are not going to push a legislative solution in 2025, right? And that then triggers the next question for me, which is, given what you just said, would you be willing to set up for the February board, kind of, we need to do a little bit of a legal advice thing, just on the narrow issue of what's the message do we want to send out for those folks that are considering it now, so that we don't, as Megan put it, just stay silent for 2 years, but actually say, this is in the interim what we expect, and that also will then give the staff a way of referring to something, and maybe we can handle that part at the February board meeting, because it sounds like we shouldn't go there until we do some additional legal advice on what our legal position is and where the board wants to go. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I see nodding heads, and I know Sherry had a comment too, so.
I think that makes good sense, because I worry that the board can't really be silent for 2 years.
Right.
There's so much goodwill that's been built. I mean, that would not help that. The other thing too, and it made me really think about it even further, called to schedule my HVAC maintenance, right? And part of it was, hey, we're a family owned, we're not private equity, blah, blah, blah. And this is on the phone message while I'm getting ready to press 9 for assistance, right? And I thought, holy cow, just think about the depth of that. But before that, I was thinking about, there's other professions that have practices, licensees, AICPA and NASPA has come, forward, and they've worked with other professions on things with other topics. I keep thinking, okay, what's going on with the medical side of the house, dental, even chiropractic, all of those others. It occurs to me, I'm gonna reach out and talk to one of my colleagues now and go through some other project and see, are there any of those topics that people are starting to coalesce around, because maybe it's there's a better solution than us just trying to decide by ourselves. And there may be some speed bumps along the way too over this next few years. As licensing bodies are trying to, actually even are trying to get this figured out.
Yeah, no, good point. So it kind of looked like everyone was in agreement on next steps there. One, not try to push. Were you saying something?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
At some point, we're gonna.
Push that into the 25 legislative session, and then to have Angie give us some legal advice at the February board meeting.
Yeah.
And then I don't
And
know
then
if you
do a
guys want
public session
on whether or not which route to go on what you want to direct laws and rules to do going forward, right? So like whether or not it can happen when it can happen, but it's more of the bigger picture of what does the board want? Do they want us to recraft something, and not we, I mean, the laws and rules committee, to recraft something that is saying you can have an APS structure, or saying you
I mean,
can't?
I don't think we should say you can't.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and in fact, as you pointed out earlier, Angie, and thanks for saying that, it's like, well, we already say you can. It just has to look like this.
Yes, I get your point. I was like,
Uh-huh.
wait, no, we don't, but yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
if you understand,
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
Is that
Yeah.
something that part's a little bit difficult in my mind, because it would require statute change, and it's things are gonna change a lot in the next couple of years. And so I like the path of taking out as much specifics in the statutes as we can, so that we have the ability to adapt as a board, because the profession is changing, it's changing rapidly. Alternative practice structures are already here. they're gonna continue to change, so I don't know that we know the answer yet. Unless to
I think
me,
that's
the legislative concept would be to strip the specifics out of it so we can adapt by rule going forward, in my opinion, but although unwinding stuff, it would be really hard for people if we say, hey, this doesn't work, let's change this. I mean, it's hard. So but I don't like specifics because then you're, hey, we can't do this until 27.
Yeah. I would agree finding a way to strip that out and getting public agreement on what we're going to define and rule going forward. How would that look? I think there's a lot of work regardless of what we have, and we're not ready for 2025.
Yeah, we're unanimous there, it sounds like. We need the legal advice, and then as far as direction to the LRC, it's.
Yeah, there's two outcomes, right? There's the direction to the LRC on what policy direction. And then there is the separate work on what is it that we can do to get out of the silence mode and have some kind of a public message in the interim that can direct staff, but also gives firms what are we dealing with here in Oregon in terms of if I want to go APS, what's the board going to say to me in the interim, right? So that to me is actually the even more urgent outcome that I would hope to get out of the February meeting.
So LRC, we're guiding them to have a break for the holidays and then come back in February, get really busy.
Yeah.
And that's the
February
question.
through April, we need this done.
Yeah.
You've got nothing else to do during that time.
Thank you.
But we have
Nowadays.
an LRC meeting scheduled in January, but what I'm hearing is that meeting may not be appropriate because we don't have the direction from the board yet, because you need legal advice and frankly, you need another couple of months just to think about it.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yes.
and there are
And
many
then
other
direct
topics
us.
we can deal with at LRC around
Did
the
they-
rulemaking stuff we need to do in 2025. So
Okay,
maybe
yeah,
other
that
reasons
is-
we can
okay.
talk about that
Did the
offline.
AICPA say when they were gonna try again?
Allegedly, from what I heard, I wasn't at the meeting. The reports that I heard is that they're gonna try again in a few months, right? So hopefully we'll know more. I can't guarantee that it'll be by February, but there is a chance that by the February board meeting, we might know a little bit more, at least from the AICPA peak side. I significantly doubt we'll know more about the NASBA side, because NASBA is, they first have to get out from under their hole on the licensure pathways and mobility stuff before they can really pivot. So I don't think it's realistic that before the regional meetings in June is that we'll know kind of more about what might come out of the NASBA side.
I mean, we certainly had a discussion about alternative pathways at the board meeting, but with about like this.
Yeah.
And the,
When you say you mean alternative practice structures?
sorry, yes, alternative, well, we had both, but yes, I meant alternative practice structures.
Okay.
And it went about like this, and that the board makeup is are several board members who are in alternative practice structures, and so there's.
Well, that's good. That's actually
Yeah.
healthy.
I agree. Yeah. And so but it furthers this what should we do kind of outcome. So, but in January, I mean, we have another board meeting at the end of January. So there may be.
Chair, if I may. One of the three items that Jason brought up, the 51% defining accounting and the tax firms serving the public interest. As far as defining the public accounting, where does that fall? The official definition when it becomes rule, or where does that fall?
Currently in statute, which going to, when the statute was drafted, it didn't narrowly define public accounting, it's more broad. And so, yeah, that's in statute, and it would be a clarification in statute. Or I don't know if it could be a clarification in rule. I turn to Angie for that.
When we have it, it's not in such, it's in rule, but that's the, so we're looking at what, if you want it to be clear, it probably should be in statute. And then, just because there's always like rules, right, you have ways to contest them and things like that that are, you know, when it's in statute, it's a little stronger. So there's that, but it also is that the way that our current statute is written for firm structural requirements is, you know, this 51%. So even if the board came out of this meeting and was like, we want to, you know, 100% allow it, it's not 100% clear that you could either, right?
Right. Because I'm of the opinion that what public accounting is the bottom line of when we serve the public interest. That goes hand in hand. Because when people see my firm, for example, they know I'm a CPA. I put my name out there, so they expect CPA service. Even if I don't do a test, they expect CPA service, and I'm serving them. And I feel when I sign a tax return, I am serving the public interest because they're counting on me. You probably hear it, Jason. I don't understand this. Just do it. I trust you. You know, that's a big burden. And we take it on. We're in this, you know, industry. We want to do it. So serving that public interest, and that kind of bleeds into the tax firm. To me, anyway, it's what are we doing to serve the public interest? What is public accounting? Is it doing a journal entry? Or is it just making an opinion on financial statements? I mean, that's broad, but we do all that stuff. And I think that needs to be clear. And if a CPA is doing it, then I think they probably should register as a firm.
One other thing that I mentioned in the LRC meeting, I picked on Megan. I'm going to pick on her again because she's an auditor. Not because you're not. I'm picking on her. But how many of people who don't know you, who know you're a CPA, how many come and say, "Can you tell me what those new leasing standards are and how those apply?" Or do they come to you and say, "Can I deduct this on my tax return?"
Right. It's really tax questions. Yeah.
Yeah, it happens all the time. Yeah.
CPA tax.
I get asked that.
So again, I'm putting that out just for your thought as you go through this, because this is it's very, very difficult. I mean, the LRC 2-hour meeting was, Amanda, do you agree? Great discussion, opinions from all sides, very difficult issues, very difficult.
All right, so I think that final piece
Oh, good. I'm glad you're able to
was,
conclude.
we're trying to.
I know.
Was, I don't think the LRC needs to probably meet in January, or at least meet on this.
Yeah.
We're not ready.
Yep.
We'll get legal advice. We'll talk at that board meeting. I forget, I was looking for the calendar. Is it end of January, early February?
Our next meeting, I think, is
Vote on it, I
February
think.
13th.
I think that makes a lot of sense, and we heard clearly that
And then-
whatever that happens in February needs to be done by April.
And it's a Christmas present
I
for
had
the
to put it on the
LRC.
calendar because I was like, oh, that's
So, everybody good with kind of our next steps, just so we keep moving?
Yes.
Okay, Angie, do we need motions on any of that, or is it
No,
just direction?
just direction.
Okay.
It's just direction, so we don't need a motion on it.
All right, thank goodness, I'm gonna keep moving. So I'm gonna keep my weaving going, we're gonna go to 9D. And just so, Jason, you can be here for that, then we'll let you get out of here. So item 9D, preparation for the 25 Oregon legislative session. I think, Martin, you wanna lead us through these?
Sure, although the first one, I think we can actually share amongst a few people, because the first one on is really a report from the town hall, and simply, I don't know if what you did this with me, and it was a joint event, so I want to simply say, first of all, thank you, OSCPA, for allowing us your facilities and your infrastructure access to this very large meeting. If I remember correctly, we had 180 or so, I think, if I remember correctly, folks attending the town hall, which is a fantastic outcome, just in terms of what we were able to reach, most of them online, not as many in the room. It was
Yeah.
very interactive. I don't know, Joe, you were there. Do you want to just?
Yeah, no, I mean, Sherry, thank you. And I know Adam, you're here, so thank you for hosting us. The total attendance was awesome. It's, you know, something to get used to when you're presenting in a room with almost nobody and everybody's online. That's still something I'm getting used to, but I think it was great. Martin does an amazing job as always. And then I think the only thing that, yeah, if we could figure out is to make, it was interactive with the questions. I would love for the mics to be turned on to really be real time. And that's kind of what we were thinking we were doing. But that was my only kind of like, oh, that would be great if people could speak up while we were talking. But we still got the questions in. I think we were able to answer them. And so
We got a ton of them.
yeah, I read one of the comments and it cracked me up, and because I knew who he was, but so I won't say his name. But he was like, he was just making fun of how dry the material was, and I was like, "What do you think you signed up for?" You signed up for a Board of Accountancy update, did you?
Yes, and.
Yeah. So I got a kick out of that one. But it's like, hey, we tried to make it as fun as we can. But this is the material we're working with.
More dad jokes. More dad jokes.
So yeah, more dad jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there can't be Q&A, because otherwise we would end up with some questions and then we wouldn't get through the material.
Yeah, which is fine. I mean, it was just kind of a thought maybe that if people can unmute and speak, because we couldn't hear, they could hear us. But anyway, that's just.
We were able to see the stuff trickle in by webcast. So we were able to see the questions, but we weren't able to hear. So it wasn't quite that live interactive, but we were able to answer the questions, and we got a lot of them, which was great.
Yeah. So that was great.
That technology usually works in that room with that software. And so it was just a fluke that it wasn't working that day.
Either that, or, I mean, I'm thinking actually that the setup was more like, how to say this? There's formats, right? There's the format where you have the live interactive back and forth, or you have the
They might
format
set
where
that
all the
wrong.
questions come in via chat.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go with structure. So we need to think about what structure we want, whether
Yeah.
it's more interactive, because the town hall that we did a year ago, you know, that there were more questions in the room that were taken along the way.
Mhm.
So we could do that with the online too, as long as someone's carefully moderating.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it always livens things up too. Keeps people on their toes. Yeah. Anyway, thank you again.
And substantively, I did not hear any concerns either about where we're going. It was really clarifying questions, not what are you doing here? I think it was mostly relief and happiness and clarification type questions.
A lot
not
of thank yous.
Yeah, you were there too, so you'll recall. Okay. Yeah. So that was good. Item 2, the stati of our legislative concepts. Last, by now, about 11 days ago, I believe, the DAS gathered all the legislative concepts that had been approved by the governor's office, which includes our 2, and literally hand-delivered a gargantuan pile into the legislative office for dropping. I requested, and even though it was late because of my vacation, but I was able to still get that approved, that our stuff will start on the Senate side. So we're going to have Senate bills they should come out under Senate bill numbers when they get published. I hope first or second week of January is when we should see them get published. Legislative session starts technically on the 13th, but those are organizational days. So the actual sessions don't start until 7 days later. So that should be Monday, January 20th, which I think is also MLK, but a legislature always meets on MLK. So that will be the start. That will be the start of legislative session. So we're good to go on that front. I'm excited to start off on the Senate side. We had DAS did something really nice. There's this group that I'm a part of that kind of emerged much more actively under the new governor, where we have quarterly meetings for kind of the smaller agencies, kind of the boards and commissions and smaller agencies. And we do a lot of kind of help each other out, best practices, information sharing. I'm on the planning team for those. And one of the offshoots of that was getting DAS to help essentially the small agencies set up a legislative day. So that occurred on December 10th. They did a really fantastic job because basically they pre-set up. So the legislature has these days where in between sessions, they come together for legislative days, every few months to kind of, do board appointments and have some committee hearings. And this time they actually had a brief special session on a budgetary issue related, I think, primarily to the fire season. They had like a single legislative day because they needed to take some budgetary actions that required full legislature to meet, and it was too urgent to wait until the convening of the session, of the regular session. So when those legislators are in Salem, it's a great time to organize these legislative days, right? And so DAS set up all these appointments. I actually partnered up, was a little nervous about that, and I'll explain why in a moment so that it doesn't come off the wrong way, because I normally always do my legislative stuff on my own because I feel really at home there, and I've done it for a very long time, longer than I care to admit in a public session. And so this time around, I was paired up with a tax board, right? And it actually turned out great because we have these, they're basically 15-minute meetings that you get with each legislator. They basically get bombarded in their offices all day by having these groups come in 15-minute increments to kind of update them on what's going on, any asks they have, right? And so we were in that mix. And so we were able to actually make direct contact with a lot of the key legislators that are going to be, quite frankly, the focus was for us on the Ways and Means folks that are going to hear our budget proposal. But it gave me an opportunity on behalf of the board to start introducing what we're doing, how we're doing, and that was really great. So things are moving, right? Even though the legislature isn't starting until January, preparations are in full swing. Any questions around that before we go to the national side, where I'm gonna again kind of ask for some help because there are other pieces out there. So Jason, can I start with you since you have to leave? Anything from the AICPA side, any last minute stuff nationally that you're aware of with your AICPA hat on?
No, nothing beyond what was reported at the last board meeting. They're still grappling with the big issues too.
Okay. NASBA side, Haley, I don't know if there's anything that you heard with your new hat on through the grapevine or not, since that the board may need to know. Maybe I'll slide in here. It's kind of part of my director's report, and I think it was also part of an upload that I made late yesterday. I will say that I had a bit of a low moment after the last annual meeting, simply because it became very clear at the annual meeting that there was still a lot of misplaced hope at the NASBA staff level, and quite frankly, I think not an insignificant number of also NASBA board members, that maybe there was a chance that these comments weren't going to come in so badly, right? And so there was a little bit of that, and quite frankly, amongst us executive director folks, like this isn't going to end well, right? And then when we asked the question of what's your plan B if these exposure draft things aren't going to end well, that you recall we responded to, right? I can now tell you from having seen, because the executive director started sharing all the responses from each other, that I would strain to use more than one finger on one hand to find a positive response to these exposure drafts, right? So and we kind of saw that coming. So when we asked the question of what's your plan B if you get a negative response to the exposure drafts, the only answer we were able to get at that time is that the answer is for jurisdictions to stop moving legislation. That was the only answer that we got, which basically translated into there is no plan B, right? And that's why I hit a kind of a low after this, and I started contacting, I basically asked 6 of my colleagues for help and said, are you willing to do a short-term, intense work project with me where each one of you would step out of your jurisdiction hats, your jurisdiction perspective, your jurisdiction policy preferences, and come up with an alternative draft to the one that was exposed that would essentially try to keep everybody in the boat on licensure pathways and preserve CPA mobility, recognizing that legislation will move, recognizing that there's different policy perspectives, some jurisdictions that can't move legislation, some jurisdictions that are moving legislation, some that love adding 120, others that don't, some that love open mobility, others that don't, right? I mean, it's a pretty big, how do we kind of keep this all together and keep it moving? So they were, quite frankly, in a similar place than I was. They were enthusiastic about it. We met intensely over the last 6 weeks. And on Monday of this week, we sent off, after our final meeting, a formal comment into the comment process, gave it to the AICPA and NASBA co-chairs of the UAA, essentially a think tank approach, right? None of this was blessed by any one of our boards, clearly didn't come through here, right? It was simply can we tap the minds of really experienced executive directors and come up with a constructive alternative that at least the UAA committee at the national level can look at as this is one option on the regulatory side in terms of language, because up until now, that process only has had language on the regulatory side that was crafted by NASBA C-suite staff without any consultation with any of the members, right? That's process-wise, that's the reality, right? And so we tried to we know that there's going to be a really difficult time at AICPA and NASBA as they're now starting to look at these comments. They're not going to look pretty. That's going to create a little bit of a down moment and a vacuum. And the idea was to do something really constructive, to step into that vacuum and say, here's a way for you to get started again, right? That was the idea. So I don't know where that's going to land. You know, the part that we could control is, do we do the work? We did the work. It was shipped off on Monday. Don't know yet what the outcome to that will be, but we tried. We gave it our very, very best.
So you haven't heard anything back yet?
Well, I've heard from Dan Vukovic, who is the UAA, the new UAA committee co-chair. So remember, this is a co-committee, right? So they have different terms on the AICPA and NASBA side. So on the AICPA side, it's still Tom Neal, right? So he's aware. On the NASBA side, the transition occurred because the NASBA cycle is different. So we now have Dan Vukovic, who's a Montana, a retired CPA, and I think board member from there, or at least former board member, not sure, but he's now the Mountain Region. He's, I think, your counterpart as the Mountain Regional Director. He's chair of the UAA committee now on the NASBA side. He and I have been in touch. I found out coincidentally last week that there was actually a UAA committee meeting this Monday as well, the same day that I had my final meeting with the group that I put together. And so I gave him a heads up on Friday, and he's just appreciative, because even though he knows right now they're still trying to figure out the process of how to look at the comments, he was not born yesterday. He knows that they will have to do some kind of a reset. And I feel comfortable saying publicly that the best thing that for me that came out of that annual conference is being able to build a relationship with Maria Caldwell directly, the new NASBA chair. That alone was worth the trip. She and I have met several times. She's really appreciative of that work that was done. She was very excited about it. So I gave her an early heads up that that's what we're trying to do, to kind of help her, quite frankly, also get this issue behind her, right? Because that was her stated goal. It's like, I want to get this behind me. You're going to listen to the states. That was a really significant statement that she made in her acceptance speech. She said it twice. Right. And so she's really trying to turn that ship around. So best thing we could do is be constructive. So that work finished just on Monday. It's in your packets if you haven't had a chance to read it, you have it there as a reference material to get an idea of what that is. So I feel good about that part, but I don't know yet what's going to come out of it, NASBA side. But that's the only other update that I have. And then I don't know, Sherry, if you know anything else on the
Well,
national side.
historically, when there've been exposure drafts, that they haven't been well received, and I received nothing that was like, yes, this is awesome, right? So, and again, it's people sharing things, but not official. Historically, we end up seeing another exposure draft come through, like a revision to something. So it kind of depends upon whether, okay, what are the next steps on this? I mean, but what's different about this is that, we have all these legislative sessions that are starting. And I mean, we too receive the information, hey, could you pull back? No, and Ohio, their legislative process is advancing very quickly. So, I mean,
They're
already in
almost
session,
done. They will be
yes.
the first ones out of the
Yeah.
gate, but they will be the first ones at the end gate, not
Yes.
out of the gate. Out of the gate was Minnesota, but the
But
Trudeau did
Minnesota-
not win the race.
Right, Minnesota, so out of the gate starting, but, there could be, Ohio is the very first state that has, let's just describe loosely as implementation. So,
Yeah, and you have in your packets from yesterday, I coincidentally received a report, but I want to be really clear about what that data is. The source is John Johnson, who's the NASBA, now I think Vice President for Governmental Affairs, is I think pretty close to his title now. And he put out an update yesterday, which I put in a packet saying, here is the legislation that has actually dropped. So let's be really clear, right? We're talking not about which jurisdictions are contemplating or working on legislation. We're talking about what has actually emerged as a bill, which is very different, right? So there's now 4 jurisdictions or at least 4 proposals that you see on that list. Ohio is one of them. I want to note Texas is very prominently on there. That's one of the largest jurisdictions now. That's the largest jurisdiction by far on the list of a bill. There's I think 2 bills that have dropped in Texas, but I don't know their process super well and the whys behind the 2-bill approach. But there's actually 2 in Texas. There's Ohio, and I think there's Minnesota, right? But we know, quite frankly, my prediction is, and we'll see if I'm right, by the time the February board meeting occurs, that by the time January 15 opens, by the time the Oregon legislative session opens, my prediction is more than 50% of regulated CPAs in the country will be associated with a jurisdiction where legislation is moving. This will not be a minority.
Which is kind of mind-boggling from the standpoint that Ohio has representation on the NASBA board. Texas has representation on the NASBA board. And yet here we are. That's in contrary to what, it's like, what is happening? But there was there was promises made that the comments, that it was going to be a very transparent comment cycle, and that there would be some sharing out of the comments. But there's been complete silence on it at this point. So we'll see after the 20th, right?
Yeah.
Our CPA board replied to each of the exposure drafts. And, I think we talked about this before. I forget who I'm talking, where between all the meetings we're in. But what we had opted to do, and Martin was really good to share the Word document, we basically responded and recognized that our response was not a typical response, that we are collaborative with the Board of Accountancy and some other language around that. And then, following is the Oregon Board of Accountancy's response. We're in agreement, and then pasted it in and sent it off to both. So because we didn't want to, our board, we talked about it, didn't want to, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the board, we didn't want to come off differently or not in collaboration together here in Oregon. So.
I saw that, and thank you for.
Yeah, it was a huge signal in terms of unity coming from here. And it did not prevent me from teasing Sherry afterwards whether her board could have considered just putting the word ditto on there.
With all the effort that's been, needed and so much water under the bridge, and this has been, a lot of focus, it seemed the right thing to do. It would, I would be disheartened if it came across that we were not in collaborative mode now at this point.
All right. What's next, Martin?
So the last item that we have under prep for the Oregon Ledge session is, I think we're about as ready as we can be. The rest is, individual meetings with members. I do want to start because February may be a little bit late and too last minute. I don't necessarily have to have commitments right now, but here's the deal. Every single time I go before the legislature on behalf of a regulatory board, it doesn't matter whether it's in a substantive committee on substantive legislation or in a budget hearing. It is always, and Earl, thank you for helping me on this in the past, right? It is a very powerful signal. If, as much as I have a great reputation over there and a great relationship, especially with our Ways and Means folks, right? They really love hearing from the regulated community directly. So if you don't show up with a board member, it's okay, but it's a little bit of like a weakness thing, right? Because they really, at the end of the day, even if they love me, right? I'm just a bureaucrat, right? What they really love is the presence from a board member. So one of my asks always is, as I go into a ledge session, right? I would love to be able to make sure that when our bill gets a hearing, that it's not just, me talking, or maybe I don't talk at all, that the testimony is primarily given by a board member. I can write it, but it's, it just sends a different signal, right? If I'm not the one being the only public face, I can be part of it, but it helps if I'm not the only public face. And the same is true for the budget hearing. So please think about that. If anyone's already saying, hey, I'm willing to take on the budget hearing, or hey, I'd like to be the one out front feel strongly about pathways and mobility, I want to be part of this. Just think about that. You don't need to give me a commitment right now, but just know we may have a budget hearing very shortly after our February board meeting. It's a very small chance that it's already would happen beforehand, because they're still going to be in organizational mode a little bit, but that could then happen very quickly, right? I will probably offer to them join first, because you get brownie points, because no one ever wants to go first, but I've kind of learned to navigate that. And it quite frankly helps me keep us out of, I'd love to get as much early motion, both on the bill as well as on the budget hearing, so that quite frankly, by end of February, early March, I know what's happening in both budget hearing wise and getting out of the first chamber. It's a selfish thing, because I'm still hoping that relates to a later agenda item to be able to go to the March conference that I'm helping NASBA organize for staff. But there's that risk that if our stuff is getting delayed, that I actually won't be able to go, because if something gets called up in spring break during that week of March, I absolutely will not go. Right? Because that's, we got to take care of home base first. But that's the idea. So please think about that. So if anyone either now or later says, hey, I would be happy to help, keep me in the loop, I would love the help.
Anybody want to raise their hand right now, or is it?
Haley?
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
And I'm already on OSCPA's list to go.
Okay. Even better. Okay. Did not know that. That's great. Not that I was supposed to know, but that's fantastic. That's fantastic. All right.
That was easy. Thank you, Anna. All right, I think that concludes 9D. Jason, we can get you out of here just in time.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the help. Express our gratitude to the LRC for all the hard work you're doing.
Yeah.
7 whole
Members
minutes
are here,
of
but,
downtime.
7 And the LRC, if we meet in January, we may be just doing some other stuff. We will put this aside until we have direction from the board.
Does everybody need a quick break?
That would be lovely.
Well, I figured- No one's kicked me yet, but I figured it might be time.
It's not my job.
Someone usually does, yeah.
Yeah, that's okay. You wanted to sit.
Stop it. So we'll pause for 5 minutes and get back at it, and we can keep moving through public session.
Perfect.
All right, thanks again, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, we good, Andrew? All right, it is 10:38 a.m. and we're back in public session. I think let's circle back just to keep bouncing. We'll go back to item 8, the pipeline committee report, and then we're going to go finish up item 9.
And Mr. Chair, if I may, just for documentation reasons on our public record, I want to acknowledge number 1, Jason Orm has left the meeting. I want to acknowledge that at some point during our last public session, Michael Mead has joined our meeting. A little bit of a running tally for the video record of the meeting in terms of changes in who's here.
Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. All right, let's jump into number 8. I set some ambitious goals while you weren't here, so we're going to move fast.
Okay.
What was the?
Usual.
The 1 p.m. end time.
Item 8, Logan, is the pipeline committee thing. Are you good with taking that on?
Sure. Yeah. I wish I could be there today. I have a sinus infection I'm recovering from. You can probably hear it in my voice. Well, we had the pipeline committee meet last Friday. It was a very, very nice, productive meeting. We ended up going in a direction where we want to leave some discretion with the OSEPA in terms of allocating scholarships. So we've taken the route of mostly, for some key items, suggesting some ranges for the scholarship size, for instance, and for the number of years we are going to spread these across. That period will be 5 to 8 years. And the amounts, I don't think are on our document, the item 8A document. I don't see them on here. But I think we are in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $5,000 for the amount for each of the scholarships. There's a lot of asking the board liaison me what the board thinks we should do. And so I tried to, not speak for us too much, but I kind of communicate the idea basically that we want things to happen relatively quickly. And I think that this plan does help realize that and give the OSCPA flexibility in case there's more or less quality applicants, but generally to move quickly is their remit. I think we're nailing things down pretty straightforwardly. We have things we want reported back on, so we can make the case that we're doing a good job here stewarding these funds. And it's great to have the OSCPA as a partner on this. I think those are the key high points. Martin, what do you say?
Those were absolutely the high points in terms of the substance. The only thing I can add is from the strict process side, and it's overlaps with item B. So Joe, I'm kind of going to combine that with item B.
Perfect.
On the pipeline committee report is we also started taking essentially the next substantive steps toward, at the meeting prior to this, when I said, hey, can we start? One of the reasons we started talking about the things that Logan just laid out is because we wanted to start getting ready for contract development. And then we actually realized in the interim, as we were talking with the Department of Justice on, which council we should work with, that actually would not be a DOJ contract council, but actually DOJ tax and finance section that would advise us on this, because it's actually under the legislation. And I keep forgetting about this, and I apologize. My bad that I keep talking about a contract, but it's actually under the legislation, a grant agreement, which is a little different than a contract. And that also meant and that's, I think the reason for that is that would allow us, essentially by means of the way the legislation is crafted, is to bypass a procurement process, right? Because it's not a contract, it's a grant agreement. And so that's very essential in terms of interest of time. It does mean that there's a different section of DOJ. The good news is a lady named Melissa Cunningham joined us for our pipeline committee meeting, and some of you may recognize that name because that is in DOJ council. That was part of drafting the legislation on the tax and in the tax and finance division. So she's super excited to be back. So we have DOJ counsel now. The stuff that Logan just reported on is actually starting essentially a process that essentially Dr. Ulmer, the chair, and Melissa and I are essentially, there's like the three of us are gonna try off during in between the committee times to start drafting based on the committee input, you know, the first version of the grant agreement so that we can be ready to go, right? And when I say ready to go, that plays into item B, 8B on your agenda, right? Because one of the things we actually have to do is actually two things that need to happen implementation side on our end, not OSCPA's end, on our end, which is one of which is we actually have to do a brief round of a rulemaking under that piece of legislation to allow us to do this whole transfer and grant agreement and all this stuff and set up kind of the framework for that. So there's a brief round of rulemaking that's required. And essentially because of that, there was a recommendation that I can't forget whether that came from you, Angie, or from Melissa, but one of the DOJ councils recommended that we take formal action as quickly as possible here so that the moment the legislation passes, as we hope, that there is authority by the pipeline committee to start working on rules. Because we're kind of on a timeline, right? The legislation is on an effective date of July 1, right? And we need to no later than the September board meeting, do we need to be completely done with having grant agreements come, you know, for final consideration before the board. Hopefully at that point, I have not yet talked about that specifically. I know you're generally aware since you were at the meeting, Sherry, but my hope is that as in the past, that there would be, that we can align this with the OSCPA kind of considerations. And I'm not sure what is at the board level, what is at the Education Foundation level, but that part would be done on the OSCPA side prior to the end of September, I think September 26th board meeting. So that's a really critical thing so that essentially both the rules piece and the grant agreement piece are done and in place by the September board meeting. So not just started, but done. So we're in a super, super tight timeline, which is why item B, 8B is on your agenda. So we can keep things rolling because that, you know, we're in a super tight timeline to make sure that ultimately, if we get it done at the September board meeting, then there is what's called in DAS budget language, I think a special payments, special transfer payment is I think what they call it. That is kind of triggered by our budget policy package, right? That cannot be authorized unless that stuff is done, and we need to be able to get that done by October, right? In order to ensure that OSCPA has what they need to have between the grant agreement and the funds, so that they know that there is certainty in what the framework is and what the expectations are to get this into a March 2026 award cycle. So that's kind of, if we don't stay on that strict timeline, we lose a whole year, right? And that's kind of how this all behind that very innocent looking, you know, authorization for rulemaking item. That's actually what's underneath all of this. That's the why, because we're under such we're under real time pressure to get that done.
Makes sense. So at that point, I would look for a motion to authorize the pipeline committee to start drafting rules upon the passage of the legislative concept 0298.
So moved.
A second?
Okay, we have a motion by Haley Lyons, a second by Jason Robinson. I'll do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I go yay.
Haley Lyons, yay.
Megan Hartley, yay.
Jason Robinson, yay.
Logan Steele, yay.
All right, Joe Sullivan, yay. I think we're doing yay now. All right, motion passes.
I'm not voting, but I'm
It's
saying.
You started it by going counterclockwise also around the table this morning.
Okay.
And it's all been very discombobulating.
Yeah, sorry, that's what you get.
We're learning.
All over the place.
Shaking it up.
All right. I was going this way, I had board members close to me this way, so.
There you go.
Perfect, thank you. We're gonna go back to 9B now, because that's how we're rolling today. We'll finally finish up 9B. So this is, I'll start by saying this, I think we can do this quickly, okay? So, but in saying that, I do think it's important as a board, we take a minute here at year end, revisit our strategic plan, look at where we're at, making sure, you know, here's our vision statement, here's the goals we set as a board. Take a second to say, how are we doing on those? What are we doing well? What are we missing the mark? Do we need to adjust anything? So I know that the strategic plan was in our materials, so I don't want to read that out loud unless you guys want me to. But you know, in terms of the vision statement, I'll read that, because I think that's kind of important to set the stage, which is to become a proactive regulator, embracing best policy and administrative practices to ensure public protection, responsiveness to changes in CPA practice, and sensitivity to pipeline issues facing the profession. To achieve this vision, the board will deepen its relationship with licensees and candidates for examination through development and implementation of a community engagement plan that will add value for existing licensees and help attract and support a deeper and more diverse pool of candidates pursuing CPA licensure. So I've liked that vision statement since we drafted it. I feel like we're doing a good job adhering to that mission to date. Any questions, concerns, comments? Not seeing any. So I guess I guess I'm proud of what we're doing and the direction the board's going. So I really think we're adhering to that mission. So that's kind of the way I felt. I think, you know, as far as goals go, we can briefly go through those and just kind of see where we're at. First goal, develop a draft community engagement plan by June 30th, 2024, and request as necessary resources to support plan implementation in the agency's 25 to 27 agency request budget. This work will integrate with the board's DEI plan and include a position request for an agency deputy director. Any thoughts, comments on where we're at there, Martin?
So just to kind of give you an update on status here, we've actually done most of this. So let's start on what hasn't happened, but then shift to the good news, right? The most obvious omission on there is that we're not there yet when it comes to actually drafting the community engagement plan. And there's a very actually kind of what should have been obvious at the time to me, but it wasn't, reason for that, which is in order to draft a plan that's realistic, you have to know whether you have the resources to actually implement the plan, because otherwise it's just a piece of paper that says, here's what we would like to do, but we have no idea whether we have the resources to do it. So if you look at that statement that Joe just read, what we actually did is focus on all the things that would allow us to build community engagement, right? So we actually have gotten a lot done, because we had a very successful agency budget request with our personnel restructure, getting a deputy position. I can actually give you an update that there was, you know, we've been in this, and probably inside this room, it's probably Jason that understands kind of DAS and HR world, since our HR person isn't here enough. It's a very interesting world that you enter when you make a proposal that requires a legislative sign-off. DAS was trying to be nice to us, and they were, because the board's request was, hey, we don't want to wait until July 1, 2025. Can we implement this early, right? DAS heard that message. They said, yes, you can, except that they are constrained in some ways because there's certain things that they're simply not allowed to do until the legislature gives final blessing. But within that framework, it turns out, and I actually found this out only 2 weeks ago, is they actually were willing to really stretch. So they actually allowing me as of January 1 to formally work with Andrew as deputy, even though the legislature has not yet signed off on it. There is one restriction on that, and the only restriction that they cannot lift is that right now I'm the only person with essentially appointing authority for the agency, and while that will not change within the appointing authority, is also disciplinary authority, right? So the disciplinary authority for the entire agency will have to stay with me until the legislature passes that budget, right? And then essentially the 3 direct reports that Andrew will have in that new structure can then become his formal direct reports, including disciplinary authority and so on. But outside of the disciplinary piece, essentially, Andrew is now permitted to start acting as deputy very officially as of January 1, and we're doing plans. So we've actually come a really long way. And between that and full staffing, I'm starting to see, and it actually ties into my executive director's report. Late yesterday, I uploaded to you kind of a significant amount of, just outreach activities and presentations and stuff. And I feel like now is the first time I can look the board in the eye based on this vision and what we've done, that I'm actually feeling like I'm not just adding all of this on top, but that it's doing exactly what the board had hoped, which is that I can give up certain things internally, right? So we've actually done great on that front, and it means that now I feel more comfortable. I don't feel bad, in all honesty, that we don't have that community engagement plan done by June 30th, because I feel a lot better now, whether it's at the February board meeting or at the June board meeting, to say, here's a draft. And by the way, I don't want to take Quinn's thunder, right? And I don't know yet whether he has a family emergency right now, which is why he had to leave. Why he had to leave. But you see there's a direct connection to one of the items that's very late on the agenda. That's a social media plan, which is part of community outreach. It isn't just about personal stuff. There's all kinds of ways in which you reach out to the community, right? We now have that capacity, right? And it's phenomenal. It's life-changing for me. So I feel incredibly lucky, incredibly supported, and I don't feel bad that we don't have that done yet. I think all we have to do there is not change just the way you indicated, Joe. We don't have to change it, just to say, hey, we focused first on getting the resources in place. Now we're putting the plan in place. And that to me is a really, as long as the board doesn't disagree, to me, that would be a perfectly appropriate answer to say, let's not change the goal, but let's just change the timeline on that part of it, because everything else that's underneath, we've already done.
Agreed. Everyone okay with that? Yeah. I think we're making excellent progress. Having the resources to do it is finally be able to have the resources is great. So we can update the dates. What do you think the appropriate date would be?
I actually feel like if we can simply update it to the June board meeting in 2025, I think would be great.
Perfect. Right, keep on moving here. Schools build proactive education and outreach into the board's licensing and compliance functions. Each one of these, if we wanted to go through, I think we've, led by Martin, he's kind of knocked out of the park here. So I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking about it, but you've done an excellent job with education, outreach, both, in universities. I know you've gone and spoke, in the classroom setting, you've done town halls. There's been, numerous other speaking engagements where we've made an effort as a board, led by Martin, to be out there to help educate the profession. So, and seek feedback. So I think it's been a really good collaborative effort.
I agree. I would say it's a start. There's a lot more that I want to do now that we have Quinn here, and it quite frankly overlaps with the third item on here with the website updates, right? We had a long-term staff member who was basically sick long-term, who was supposed to do that, which is why we didn't do that yet. But Quinn has been so life-changing just in the month and a half that he's been here, that I feel really, really enthusiastic right now that all this stuff can stay and that it's coming. It's just going to be not quite on that timeline. And so I agree with everything you just said. I'm just saying I see it more as a floor and that there's a lot more we can do on top because we have no infrastructure right now when it comes to social media, that the type of that outreach. I don't have that capacity, but with Quinn, I do.
Did he connect with Tom and Cassandra at NASBA?
Um,
You made the intro, right?
we have started making the connection.
Okay.
Yes. There hasn't been a lot of, there's been so far, there's been an acknowledgement that there of the outreach. I don't know that there is much beyond that right now, but they know that he's trying to connect him to the NASBA resources. But quite frankly, he's not twiddling his thumbs. He's doing everything that he can under his own power. And it's phenomenal. It's like, if anything, I may have to stop him. I don't have to push him.
Let's just use the free support where we can though.
I got here late, started late, so I held myself back from asking about the award-winning journalism part.
Okay.
And I was very curious and didn't want to put him on
I
the spot,
think he was
so I
being slightly facetious, but this gentleman is a former reporter with the Kaiser Times. He literally held that place together, and it is a phenomenally awesome background.
Yeah.
For us on the communication side, because he feels really comfortable with this stuff. And so and what he didn't say, but what I will say is it's not just that he, worked for the local newspaper. He has both bachelor and master level degrees in communication. So he also has an extensive educational background. And so far, I'm not hearing any complaints from Jeremiah that he's, negating the compliance stuff, right? Which is still the primary part of that, job.
And
So feeling really lucky about the way that worked out, really
the
lucky.
statement was, I'm a award-winning journalist, not I won awards in journalism. So,
award-winning?
yes, so he's
Award, W-A-R?
Yeah, award.
Oh,
I heard award-winning also.
I heard
Oh,
award-winning.
I completely misunderstood this.
He's won some award, so he's gotten a trophy from something.
oh, wait,
So,
now I'm confused.
He's just saying, like, he could have won an award in softball, but he's, the two don't go together.
not award winning.
Oh, I didn't say award.
Yeah, that's what. I won 2 awards, yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right, let's keep moving. So it's develop, and Martin, this just kind of goes hand in hand with what you were just saying. Develop and implement communication structures and resources to support effective regulation and community engagement in a manner sensitive to the differing needs of practitioners and the next generation of applicants for licensure. So I think what you just said about Quinn kind of rings true. I think, what about the website and the date there?
Exactly. And so all I was just trying to say is that if we just push that date out by 1 year, we're on the right track. We now have that resource later than I thought we would, but I think quite frankly, he is coming in and hitting the ground running so hard that I have no issues with simply updating that by a year.
Okay. Everyone good with that?
Yeah, aside from Jeremiah, is there any other staff that was on board before you came on?
Was there any what?
Yeah. So any other staff that were here before you?
No.
Yeah, so Martin and Jeremiah have rebuilt the entire team. Thank you again.
Yeah. Much appreciated.
If you recall, because most of us were on the board at that time, there was a lot.
Yes. It's a lot.
Yeah. There was going from echo chamber to being able to do all of this. Right, because there was no staff here other than temporary.
Yeah.
And Jeremiah was very politely but firmly asked to step out of his role and saying, you're not a new licensing manager, because we need to keep the doors open. That's where we started. So this is huge for us in terms of
progress. And so, when I take a step back, even to have an updated strategic plan where it's allowing us to be proactive and think forward, because historically for people that have been on the BOAC or, on the board long term, it was all about the caseload. And, we've dug out of that. Jeremiah's done an amazing job there, and it's really allowed us to kind of be proactive, which is right in our vision statement. And so that's a massive change. since my time, you know, in BOAC and on the board.
Absolutely. I will never forget my first board meeting with this board where I basically had to say, we may have just survived and, you know, you may have just come out of a $250,000 IT disaster that produced nothing, but your biggest problem is on the compliance side because we have cases up the yazoo, case resolution times that are beyond acceptable, 2, 3, 4 years. A single investigator that was about to retire, no processes or procedures in place, everything was in her head. And I basically had to say to the board, you are on the precipice of losing your credibility as a regulator. And if we don't fix that, forget IT, I can figure out a way to kind of, you know, stabilize that pretty quickly. But that piece is our biggest problem. And we've come a really long way because in those days, we had to focus almost exclusively on building resources compliance side, building a BOAC process, building an inquiry process. We had none of those things, right? We had to do a fee increase. You know, we got OSCPA's help on a fee increase, re-resourcing. It was all compliance during my first 5 years that I was here. I did very little on the licensing side. And it's interesting coming back 5 years later that essentially we're now on the flip side of the equation, that we have the luxury that we can say the compliance stuff is actually working really well, right? We have to focus on all these other things. So I feel really good about this.
No, I do too. And, you know, one of the things, you know, as board chair, Martin, I need a lot. And I try to recognize that, like, as a board and probably me mostly is like, let's do all these things. And then we go back to our regular jobs and expect them to get done. And they come back and they're done. Right. And so I think that's, you know, it's good to just pause and say, thank you, Martin and Jeremiah and Andrew and the rest of the staff, because it's like, they're the ones doing the bulk of the legwork, as well as the committees that we've created. And it wouldn't happen without them. So it's pretty cool. All right, trying to keep us moving quick because there's not a whole lot of bad news here or like things. The next one is improve operational efficiency and licensing and compliance through technology and process improvements and resource that work as necessary.
Yeah, and there probably will say that's the part where there's a ton of work that needs to still happen, because first we had to get the staff in place. Resourcing wise, I think we have the resources that we need right now. The biggest issue, and I'll phrase this very carefully because we are in a public meeting, it is not easy for a small agency to maneuver the IT and procurement space. There's a lot of different partners we have inside DAS. And I think I can go as far as saying in a public meeting is that there's a lot of good intent inside DAS in terms of figuring out, you know, what the right amount of oversight is, what the right of direction is. But the only honest thing I can say to the board is, aside from maybe slightly facetiously commenting that I'm really happy to have Andrew as my deputy now, who's primarily assigned to actually figure out a solution to all this. It is very, very difficult to get a clear answer as to what the expectations are or what the processes are that you're supposed to move through to address the issues that we have. So it's not an issue of what we're being asked is difficult or complicated. We're not even at that stage, because what is being asked is changing all the time in terms of what's acceptable, what's not, what the process is supposed to be, what's not. I don't know, are you okay if I just actually jump, because it directly overlaps with your report? You want to just say a sentence or two about where we're at on procurement, because it's really critical to accomplish that strategic kind of objective of us, and kind of talk about that, what we kind of were able to pull off in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, going back to our September meeting, had brought out the plan of moving our licensing database off the DAS IT server onto an external non-state server. We're looking at Amazon's or AWS's government server, because other agencies have done that. And I reached out to procurement and IT to find out if I knew we were allowed to, I reached out to find out, as far as oversight, if they needed to, oversee the procedure or whatnot. And then got kind of the runaround between 4 different people because of the size of the project, how little it was gonna be, didn't get any clear answers. And then ended up just getting a no, but then got on a wait list for a meeting with a senior DAS IT procurement officer. So that was scheduled in October, and I just had that meeting earlier this week. And so that's the time frame for getting help. And it worked out really good because the Brian Eilitz, who is the DAS IT, anyway, he is helping DAS facilities.
That's surplus. I think, or that's facilities? Cool.
Surplus.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you. Work on a statement of work for a procurement for a new FileMaker vendor. FileMaker is the software that we use for our database. And he was like, this is great timing because he had just finished their statement of work. Ours is going to be a little bit different, but still some of the same material. And we'll be able to on that. And with this timing, it will cut back our 6-month time frame to be able to have a vendor to hopefully 4.5 months. And
Which is
with that,
fantastic, yeah.
We'll have going through the full procurement in public. I can't even request.
Request for proposal?
Thank you, yes.
Sorry, I just was trying to make sure I was on the same wavelength.
Yeah, that was it. And so with that, then we'll be able to have amendments in our contracts to have ongoing support. So we won't have to continually go through procurement.
Yeah.
As small contracts.
Thanks, Andrew. So the short version is we are super lucky that we found out that we can piggyback on none other than DAS itself, because one of their own entities has very similar needs to what we do, and we can piggyback on their work, which means that it's less work for everybody, it's faster for us, and quite frankly, gives me a defense, given that we are in an environment where we're constantly getting different messages about what's okay and what's not okay. By piggybacking on DAS itself, it will hopefully, and I know you may not agree, Jason, when you and I talked about this on Friday, but I still have this eternal hope that it will protect us a little bit if then somebody says, oh, you should have done it this way as opposed to the other way, that I at least will be able to say, well, we followed in the footsteps of DAS itself. So I'm hoping that that will give us a little bit of insulation, but maybe not. Jason was a little doubtful.
They're not saying, but underlying it, procurement in itself is really complicated. There's a lot of red tape that goes on with the procurement process for a state agency. And then to mix IT into it makes it, because there's other entities they now have to work with and get by on if they want to do something. DAS doesn't like to let go of things, and we're already in a DAS facility being facilitated through that. So there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that we're having to navigate. And they only have one IT procurement person unless they actually hired another person. Because the last guy retired in August and there wasn't a plan that I knew of before I left to replace him.
Yeah. So it's a tough background, but the super high level 1-sentence answer for that whole part of the strategic plan is this remains the biggest arena of work to still be accomplished, right? There are legitimate reasons for that. We're making progress now that we have staffing. I have Andrew in that position with more capacity to do it because we were changing our stuff. But I don't think that there's anything in here where we need to say we need to change where we're going. We just need to adjust kind of a little bit the timelines underneath, but I still feel very comfortable with what's there.
Okay. Makes sense.
That's
Any other comments, questions? Not seeing any. And so I think the final one, I think we're doing a great job on, but that is to become a leader in the national discussion on creating more flexible options to achieve CPA licensure without lowering standards and without endangering the profession's key national accomplishments in the arena of substantial equivalency and mobility. So I feel like we've done that quickly, and I know Haley's now in a NASBA leadership position, which is awesome. So we have Oregon representation there. I know Martin was speaking earlier about the work he's done, in addition to all the work he's doing directly at the board. So I think we're doing a great job here. Any other comments?
No, congratulations, Haley. When was the last time we were on the board?
What you mean the last time she was on the NASBA board?
Anyone?
Probably
Oh, anyone from Oregon? Oh.
Ray.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah,
It was Ray probably,
Yeah.
right? Because Ray was on the board for a while, and then you have to go way back prior to Ray to like Sandra Phelan is a name that rings a bell.
Sandra Saran.
Sorry, Sandra Saran, sorry. Sandra Saran, and then there was way back Oregon NASBA chair, but I forget what
I
his
heard
name.
it's been like 18 years since we've had
Yeah.
a presentation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we took a
Look at you.
long break.
For you, Haley. Good job. Pretty cool. So I guess just to keep moving, does anyone have modification outside of the 2 dates that we've agreed to kind of roll forward to 25? Anyone want to modify anything, add new goals, anything on anyone's mind?
Okay.
Not hearing any, so I don't think we need a motion just to direct staff, do we?
No.
Okay, perfect. That concludes 9B, so we're done with all the nines. Our work session, which was a lot. Let's keep moving to new business. 10A is the 2025 board calendar review. So this, I think just based on,
And that was uploaded yesterday, sorry.
yeah, that was in the supplemental.
That was in the supplemental, so that's where you would need to.
Yeah, so if you guys don't mind cleaning that up. And
Where
then
is it? 10?
Angie, I know we talked earlier about getting some council advice from you that first date. Do you have an opinion on whether that works for you or
It
not?
does not work for
The
me.
February 13 is not a good date for you.
I have a hearing that day.
A hearing or pharmacy board meeting where you then, in a board meeting for 3 weeks or 3 days or however long the
You
board
want
meetings
to
are.
talk to us about it in detail?
Yeah, right. And then December 11th, I have a pharmacy board meeting where it's 3 days.
Oh, boy. So we're gonna have to like really rejiggle this. Okay. So do you want to start with the 13th?
I can do the
then?
20th, the next Thursday, but I don't know if that.
I know
That's really.
that might be
deep.
pushing that into busy season too much for most people is my guess.
Yeah, I mean, the last 3 weeks of February are tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough. So do we want to look at 13 minus 7 would probably make 6?
So that I have. Pharmacy board meeting is through the 7th. So I can go to January.
Can we do close sometime towards the end of January, or does that not work? Or is-
Does that, how much trouble will we in if we do end of January with?
I
the
will bring
OX stuff?
0 things to the board meeting.
Sorry, what?
I would.
Thanks.
They will bring
Sounds
0.
awesome.
You've just incentivized them.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
Could you do it the Friday, the 14th?
You mean
Yeah.
Friday, the 14th, you don't have a conflict?
No, my trial should be done on the 13th, so I mean, it shouldn't go more than a day. I'll be a little fried, but I can do it.
I can't do the 14th.
You can or cannot?
Get in trouble scheduling that Valentine's Day for anybody.
Oh, that's a.
I don't know. We'll make sure that's an extra long meeting.
Is that important?
Yeah, get everybody in trouble.
What about the 17th? The Monday, it's a Monday.
No, that's President's Day.
Oh,
Yeah, too far into February, I'm assuming. So.
Can we go
it's-
back to like the 10th? Oh, no, you've tried.
So you said, again, what was the earlier you couldn't do?
I can't do the 5th, 6th, or 7th. I could do the 4th,
How about the 4th?
Which months?
February.
February.
We're talking February
Tuesday.
4th.
I like February 4th.
4th?
That works for me.
I can probably do it.
4th? Sounds like we have takers for February 4th.
Let's plan, I haven't heard anyone say no on the 4th, so let's move that to the 4th.
Okay, so February
The other dates are
4.
way too far out for me to.
But I know that there was one,
But yeah, those are fine.
December
uh,
11th, I can't do it.
and then you have the December 11, and that's the one where you conflict with pharmacy, which is a 3-day affair, right? That's the way we used to be, folks here.
No.
We've really cleaned up our act. Before BOAC, we had 3-day board meetings.
I can do the week before the weekend. I've never.
Yeah, maybe, if we did like the week before, like December 5th, maybe? Would that work for people? Friday?
Yeah.
It's so far out.
Yeah,
Or,
no,
or the 4th, which is a Thursday?
I'm really booked that day.
Yeah, all right.
yeah, that sounds good.
Which one? The
Fourth.
I do
December
have, it's
4th.
funny, I actually have 5 recurring appointments on my calendar.
So do I.
And I'm like, I'm sure they'll get rescheduled 5 times between now and then, but
All right, so
So
we're
what day for
changing
December?
to this February 4 and then also to December 4.
Yes.
4 is the magic number for the calendar.
Yes.
Sounds like it.
and then everyone was good with the June and September dates? Okay, perfect. So that one would be, I would look for a motion then to approve the proposed board meeting dates for 2025 with the changes to the February meeting and the December meeting.
This is Haley Lyons, so moved.
Jason Robinson, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second with their names already spoken. I'll do a roll call.
Robert Olivia, I vote yay.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, yay.
Logan Steele, yay.
Joe Sullivan, aye. Motion passes. Good job,
Have fun,
everyone.
right?
We're nailing this.
No one gets to ask Andy for advice on the difference between I and yay.
Yay is voting yes with excitement in my.
Feels all really enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic guy.
I like it.
All right, let's keep moving on. 10B approvals for attendance at NASBA conference for executive directors, staff, and legal counsel. This is March 25th through 27th in Florida. So I would need a motion to approve the attendance as described.
Haley Lyons, I approve. Do you want to discuss it? I'm not approving, I'm motioning. I so moved.
And I don't know that they have the text on here, so I don't think that they know what you're asking.
I think I
Oh,
just
you?
read
You
it,
just
didn't
said
I?
it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was for the
Okay.
attendance at the Florida conference, March 25th through the 27th.
Oh, okay. I thought that we had to like put in specific names around, you know, who all would be authorized.
No, I just said executive director, staff, legal counsel.
Yeah.
Anybody that you would.
Perfect.
I think we should leave it open like that, not.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I'd rather leave it open.
Even better.
Yeah. So I think we have a motion from Haley Lyons,
Jason Robinson, second.
second from Jason Robinson, roll call.
Robert Olivia, I vote aye.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, yay.
Joe Sullivan, aye. Motion passes. Perfect, this is going great. All right. 10C, 2024 Q3 NASBA CPA exam results, the data and candidate care report. So that's in our materials. Any discussion, questions?
It's informational only. If there are any questions, I may not know the answer, but I can try to get them. But I always make it a point that when we get those reports, to put them in the board packets. They're public. Things are also accessible to our guests. They're accessible to OSCPA. So it's just, I think it's just a good thing from an accountability standpoint, but I don't, just let me know if there's any questions on that and I can see if I can find an answer from the right people.
Okay, perfect. We are through new business. So I'm now going to recess public session and we'll be entering executive session under authority of ORS 192-660 sub 2 sub F sub H. The time is now 11:22 a.m.
Do we have anybody appearing at a specific time where we're gonna get in trouble by doing it early?
We have one set of respondents that is set to appear at 12:10.
Do you wanna pull us back out and get some other public items done and wait with exec session?
Yes. Can we call them and say there's no need?
I mean,
I was literally planning like, hey, if you want to keep the comments really freaking quick.
what?
Yeah, someone let me back in. I don't know if that was on purpose.
That was on purpose, Adam. Thank you. I didn't realize we had a respondent coming in at 12:10, which is when I was hoping to wrap up the whole meeting. So anyway.
Oh, you were even more radical than.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was.
When you weren't in here, I was like, we're gonna knock this thing out. So
Is Amanda there?
Yeah.
But is she there?
yeah.
She's like, I was gonna be doing something else, but.
Okay, we're already going, so that's on tape. All right, this is
Just kidding.
This is the Oregon Board of Accountancy on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024. It is now 11:23 a.m. and I am now reconvening public session of the Board of after conclusion of
We haven't concluded.
well,
We're gonna go back.
yeah, or we will go back to executive session. So do we need to do a quick roll call again? Okay, I think we're okay. Same attendees as there was 2 minutes ago. So we're gonna keep ahead, moving with item number 12. And just remember from earlier, we did add one more settlement proposal. So 12D. Case-
13.
Oh, wait, mine says something different, sorry.
Oh, sorry, it's 12D, not 13D, for whatever sets of reasons. Maybe I screwed up the numbering on your.
Here, hold on, give me a second. Mine says something different, so just give me a second here.
I don't know what the hell just happened. I must have had a numbering error somewhere on the
That's fine.
chair agenda.
I think you changed it from what it normally is.
I'll
So the script is based on what it normally is.
No, and my actually have something that's totally different numbered, so in front of me.
Yeah.
So don't worry about it at all. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and go to item 13, which is the consideration of settlement proposals. And recall, we added 13D, which is the additional, which is case 23-028. So do I have any motions along with your names?
Haley Lyons, I move to approve the settlement proposals as presented in the materials.
Jason Robinson, that's right.
Okay, we have a motion. Any second? Any discussion? Not hearing any, so we'll do a roll call.
From Valdivia, I go aye.
Haley Lyons, aye. Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Joe Sullivan, aye. Motion passes. All right, thank you. We'll move on to item.
It's 13.
Oh, that's where I messed up, so.
No, it's, I messed up on the chair agenda. And so essentially,
Yeah,
everything after exec session is +1, so 12 is 13,
Yeah.
and 13 is 14.
No,
so-
it's fine, yeah. So I'll just move on to item 14, which is report of the chair, which is me. I had just had a few very quick things. Michael, who was with us earlier, I don't see him on Zoom anymore, but we did appoint Michael Mead to BOAC, so that'll be a great addition. And then Ray Johnson has been reappointed now to the LRC, so he's back with us, and always great to have his experience and wisdom on the LRC. So just two things to make sure everyone's aware of. And then finally, regarding my own kind of board service, I know we've talked about it previously, but just a reminder, because we do have leadership elections coming up. My second term ends, I think technically in March?
Technically in March, yes.
Technically in March, so I'll wrap up. It doesn't necessarily have to be in March, is my understanding, so if I need to stick around for a little bit longer, I can do that.
Serve until replaced, essentially. So
Yeah,
we-
based on the way today's meeting is going, you might kick me out. But, so that'll be coming up, and just keep that in mind for everybody, so.
Are you allowed to leave before your third term is up?
I believe I am. That's, I actually have been around for so long between the board and BOAC that I have no idea how many years it's been. So I think it's time to get a good, fresh perspective. And, you know, making sure there's opportunities for other people to serve too, so. Anyway, that is it for my.
Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry, but I have to go back to the prior motion. Can I just make sure I heard this correctly, that on the prior motion conducted under consideration of settlement proposals, was that just on one of the settlement agreements, or was it an en banc on all of them? Four.
All four.
Okay, it was
Yeah.
en banc. for
Aren't
all.
they five? Aren't there five? Because we
No,
didn't add one
There's three and we added one.
that is on the version that we have in the thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's-
great.
Yeah,
She said proposals.
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
Just
it was
making sure. I
proposals
just wanna
as
make sure
presented,
this-
Proposals
meaning,
as
yeah, all of
presented,
them, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
perfect.
read
So
that.
we'll go to, next we'll do the report of vice chair.
I have nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you. Keeping us on track. I like that. We'll move on to item 16, report of the treasurer. So Jason, you have anything for us today?
We're in a good financial position. So Martin's done a great job of running the board expenses and revenues.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jason. Item number 17, report from NASPAC. Haley.
I don't have anything to add that hasn't been said, more to come post-January board meeting, certainly.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that you think would be worthy there?
No, I think we already discussed everything there was to discuss.
Okay. Perfect. Item 18, I know we've covered some of these items a little bit already, but report from staff. And so, you know, Martin, you want to kind of lead us through these and.
Yeah, and
And
I
then
think we can actually do this very quickly because we actually have covered a good part of them. The personnel update is largely covered because in essence, it overlaps with the governor's budget. You know, we're on full staffing. We got everything we needed to, so I can now talk much more publicly about the governor's budget because there's always this kind of embargoed period where you're not allowed to talk about the governor's budget until it's formally released. That occurred on Monday, December 2nd. The short, high-level answer is we got everything we wanted. I do want to just disclose, and I know it's kind of tiny details in the minutiae, but I don't want anyone to be surprised, right? There is one item that went sideways, not through any doings here. This was just, quite frankly, a DAS internal thing where I will now have to work with LFO on one adjustment request to the governor's budget. It has to do with, you know, deep in the weed details on the personnel side. The state of Oregon went through a all-encompassing, what they call pay equity adjustment period. There were 3 of our staff that were impacted by that. In 2 of those cases, the process was done correctly. In one of those cases, unfortunately, too late to fix in the governor's budget, it turned out that the process was not done correctly. Everything was fixed just in time for kind of the last paycheck of this season, right? But it now means that essentially I had to go back to DAS and say the basis on which the personnel budget was calculated and what they call the roll-up is now incorrect. I had because none of this stuff was budgeted, right? Which is fine for the current biennium, but it puts us in a position where if you don't fix it, it sets us up with insufficient expenditure authorization on the personnel side. So the accounting side of DAS has calculated what the adjustment needs to be. I had a meeting with the CFO side of DAS where that got authorization to get green light to work with the legislature, because remember, it's the governor's budget now. I can't just go into the legislature and say, I want to play with the governor's budget. I now need to get green light. That was an easy ask because it was a DAS internal thing that had gone sideways, you know, unintentionally. They're still fully supporting us. Now we just need to adjust the numbers slightly. It's about a roughly $40,000 adjustment that we need to make in terms of the asks. I am going to have to go in and do a little bit more tweaking, which was not the plan. Right. But bottom line is we got everything that we wanted in the governor's budget, full support for the personnel package, full support for the accounting scholarships piece. I mean, it was a beautiful thing. I will say one more thing. We can count ourselves incredibly lucky around this stuff, right? While it's true, and I can now say this because it's public now, right? The final version of the governor's budget came out a lot more relaxed than what it looked like for a while in the development process of the budget, because essentially general fund and other fund agencies were asked to essentially take scenarios to the budget that included up to 20% cuts to their agencies as part of developing the governor's budget. We were never once were other funds agencies like us even asked to provide those types of scenarios. Now, why do I bring that up? It's a big deal because it means that they're willing to break the mold. Look, literally not much more than about 67 miles to the north, okay? What's happening in Washington right now is that my counterpart at this board, they have to take what I like to call solidarity cuts, right? They have a cut scenario in their Washington state budget, and it's a one size fits all. Their board of accountancy is going to have to go through cuts that make absolutely no difference to the general fund out of solidarity because everybody's getting cut. We never had to do that here. So please step back, look at the big picture, and just say, thank you that we have folks here that understand that some of that stuff just doesn't make sense. And I feel really blessed. So it's not just oh yeah, we got everything we wanted. We can't take for granted the type of environment that we have here right now. And all you have to do is look one state to the north and count our blessings. And I'm not even talking about the fact that they are terrified that in that environment up there, that the next shoe is going to drop, because you don't know, new legislature, new governor up there, that they're also going to face a sweep. And here we are with a proposal, ironically modeled after something that happened in Washington, going in a completely different direction with our excess funds, right? So we can feel really lucky about that. So that's really my budget update. Operational updates, do you have anything to add?
Renewals, we finished and then sent out, ended up lapsing 501. 245 of those were active. 325 retired, the rest inactive. Of all that, we've had 30 active reinstate and 17 retired reinstate and 3 inactive reinstate.
So those numbers are historically relatively in line what happens normally in a renewal season. So basically kind of what happens is that historically for us, it's been a very, very steady piece where essentially we lose a whole bunch of folks during lapsing, and then there's this constant inflow that you see on your ratification lists at the board meetings of the people that are coming in new, right? And so far we've been really lucky. Like if you think about this from a pathways perspective, right? We keep talking about, the AICPA data on, what is it, 75% of the CPA population is allegedly within 10 years of their retirement date, right? So we keep thinking we're going to fall off the ledge, but if you look at our licensing numbers, including, the key part here was the active licensees, which is where most of our revenue source is. That's why I'm looking at that subcategory even harder than the remainder. Not that all of them don't, not that the others don't matter, but what really matters is the active level licensees, because that's where our primary income source is.
Mhm.
And we have been astoundingly stable, not growing, but stable for like well over a decade now in terms of the number of our active level licensees. So I feel very blessed, very, very blessed on that front as well. Anything else you have operationally? Beyond thank you for maneuvering the procurement stuff. I can't even imagine how difficult that is.
Operationally, doing a transition to deputy and taking on a lot of various tasks that Martin's been delegating, and also brand new has been going on. We'll be bringing a customer service plan. February board meeting, that was an initiative sent out by the governor's office
exec agencies?
Yeah, we are mandated, we're on a mandatory deadline for all agencies to produce a customer service kind of expectations plan in terms of the level of customer service. This aligns with my previous report to the board that this governor is far more active when it comes to holding agencies accountable for performance at a whole bunch of different levels. This is one of many initiatives, is to say, I want to have a set of customer service standards, and there's like a draft framework out there that's kind of making their way through, and we're going to have to adopt our version of it. So that's one thing that you can expect to see at the February board meeting, so that we don't have to bug you after the February board meeting, because we do need to have it by March 31, and I don't want to have to ask for an extension. I want us to look good. So that's another piece. Anything else there? No. Okay, so while we're on plans, I realized two things as I was pulling this together. One was timely, the other one was not. Timely in the sense of the last item on here, the second to last item on here is that I realized that just after the board meeting, before my vacation, I was able to update the next iteration of our DI plan. So you have that in there. It was actually really fun writing this one, because this is the first one that does this really beautiful integration of our strategic plan, and quite frankly, being blessed that actually several governor's offices ago, but continuing here, there's really been this shift that's allowed agencies like us to actually talk about this and do stuff in a meaningful way. So instead of, because it used to be like 10 years ago, I would have to put in a report on the demographics on our staff level, which basically, quite frankly, in the bigger scheme of things, make no difference on a staff of this size, right? So the fact that we have the ability to do what we can do now and say, what can we actually impact, and allow us to really shift this to a report that's about our workforce pipeline initiatives and what we're doing there in terms of that's meaningful to us and the community that we regulate. That's a really huge deal. That shift occurred in the executive branch, I would say probably about 6 years ago, and it's really kind of grown and fostered and allows us to kind of do this integration here in a really meaningful way, where we can, focus on where we can have a much broader impact on a diversity and pipeline impact perspectives, when it talks about what we're doing to actually make things better for the profession that we regulate, right? So I feel really blessed about that. You have the latest iteration of that now in your packet. What you also got in late yesterday, and I don't want you please to get the idea that I was trying to slide this in at the last minute. It was an honest miss, and if you have questions, I'm happy to take it back up at the February board meeting. But I also realized that I had a October 1 deadline that I met just before going on vacation to update our key performance measure report. So you see that in your supplements, right? And I don't know if you want to spend time on that today or not, but I simply want to give you a highline summary, right? They still don't look great, but they look far better than the last iteration. And actually, if you look at the data points in that report, there are numerous instances where you can see actually what we talked about earlier today in this transition from chaos to normalcy, right? You can see exactly when you look at the historical data on the complaint stuff, right? What happened when Jeremiah had to step out and we had to let go? And you see the data impact when we were able to pull him back, right? Because you can already see that our actual performance on how we're doing compliance side went up dramatically from the 2023 fiscal year to the 2024 fiscal year. Do we still have work to do? Absolutely. We still have work to do on the customer service side. That to me is logical, given what we talked about earlier on the strategic plan, right? Because we still have some deficiencies there, right? But it allows me effectively, super highline summary, when it goes to budget hearing and budget hearing time, that I can say, we are, based on the data, on the right track, because our numbers are moving in the right direction, right? They're not great yet, but they're moving in the right direction. Now, heads up, I will supplement this at the February board meeting because my staff already knows that on a voluntary basis, that is not required, but I always do it because it's a great tool for the budget hearings. We will pull updated numbers for the period ending December 31st of this year. So we can go in with the freshest possible key performance data into the legislative session. I will probably end up pulling two sets of numbers. One is for the first half of the fiscal year that started on July 1. And I will also do it for the calendar year ending December 31, just to get an idea of kind of how our numbers changing to kind of craft our stuff. And I will bring that to the February board. So we can kind of leave it there and then kind of wrap it all up in that discussion. But my goal is to be accountable as much as possible and to go beyond the minimum that's required. For the budget, the minimum requirement is what you have in your packet today. I like to go beyond the minimum because as a small agency, it's possible for us to update these numbers and go in with fresh data, right? And so I will be excited to kind of build that in our budget presentations and bring that to the February board. And so you can get the latest then. And then the last thing that I have is, since Quinn isn't here, I would like to simply ask for permission to delay the presentation to the February board on the draft communications plan. I quite frankly, it blew my socks off that within less than a month of him being here saying, hey, I'm ready with a plan that I hadn't even asked him yet to produce. I just talked about, hey, here's my long-term goal for you to help me with this, right? And he simply walked into my office with a draft plan a couple of weeks ago. A lot sooner than that. So I wanted to give him kind of a shot at the apple, but I really don't want to do it for him. You know, he's really excited about this, and I think we can refine it a little bit more and then bring it in February. And I think it would be nice if he can have a few minutes to do that then, and not me having to do it for him. So with that, I have nothing else to report unless there are questions. And you have my list of outreach activities in your that happened over the last 3 months. Please don't expect that to continue quite at that level, because during ledge session, it's a little harder to keep that going.
Okay. All right, perfect. Yeah, so we can defer the Quinn's presentation until the February meeting and keep moving. So we'll go on to item 19, the complaints committee meeting. So we have meeting summary from November 7th.
Nothing to report, isn't in the minutes.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Item 20, the peer review oversight committee, that report from November 12th. Haley, any comments on that?
Nope, we met on the 12th and continue to do good work. There will be a annual report probably at the February board meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I was not there for this. Is the first committee meeting where I had to miss.
Okay, that's right, you left. I mean,
had
yeah,
to
it
leave
was
because I had an
7th.
unmovable medical procedure that I could not reschedule. So that was, I felt really bad about that. It's nothing I could do, but I actually am really glad that it's a report because I wasn't even there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Except for the first, I think, 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Then I had to sign off.
Okay, thank you. I think I might have saw lunch just come in, so maybe what we do is finish the rest of everything we can on the public agenda. And then we can break, grab lunch, come in and just start tackling the agenda, if that works for everybody. Okay, keep moving. Still think maybe 12:30 was overly ambitious. I forgot about the respondent coming, but I think we can get close to it. So, all right, let's keep moving. So item 21, we have the ratification request. So just remember, we've removed item C, the municipal roster. So I'd be looking for a motion to approve the ratification request for both the CPA certificates and permits and B, firm registrations.
Oh, no separate roll call?
Yeah, no.
Haley, so moved.
Jason Robinson, second.
Right. Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I vote aye.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, yay.
Just trying to make me laugh every time. Joe Sullivan, aye. Motion passes.
I do have a comment I just want to make about the ratification for firm registrations. The list only had one firm on it. We do have, I think, 10 or 11 that are still pending that were received between the prior board meeting. They just have not got to the finish phase yet.
Okay.
Training the new staff on it, and she is not here right now.
Perfect. Thank you for the update, Andrew. Let's see. So item 22, board officer elections. So remember, I kind of talked about at least where I'm at for 2025. And so we can kind of go through elections here. Rob, do you mind if I mention I called you?
No, go ahead and say what you need.
As he's the vice chair, I just touched base from prior to the board meeting. I think he doesn't have the capacity personally right now to potentially be the chair. So I just touched base with him prior to the board meeting. Just wanted you guys to be aware of that. So kind of this is more of an open discussion in my mind. Is anyone looking to be the chair or wanting to be the chair? Can't wait to get rid of me as the chair after today's meeting.
I think we've all enjoyed your fresh perspective, even though you've taken the fail. So I love the way you've been running the meetings and giving your advice on stuff personally.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I like to laugh at myself at least, but you might as well have fun, right? So, but again, anyone, look, if anyone wants, I think is a good time to kind of speak up and say, hey, I would love that opportunity if you think of it as an opportunity. And
all I will say is no matter who steps up and ends up in that role, I will work my heart out for whoever, the board itself, of course, but for the chair. I try to do as much as possible behind the scenes to make it easy.
Yeah. From my perspective, I think any member of this board would be excellent at it. And so that's why I'm asking if anyone wants to say, hey, I'd be happy to do it. I know Haley's got a lot with NASBA on her plate, so
She's got to go to those meetings anyways. Might as well go there as the chair and the.
There is that, yes.
So, yeah, but I'd be happy to nominate any one of you if anyone wanted it. And if nobody's itching to do it, I can do it for a couple more meetings until I roll off if you'd prefer, or we can do whatever the board prefers here. Mostly just want to do it fast.
This is a little bit like when you get your vaccination, right? And it's like the needle points. Can we just get it done?
I mean, I can do it.
I officially nominate Haley Lyons.
Thanks.
Okay, say your name then.
Rob Valdivia, officially nominate Haley Lyons for board of accountancy.
Jason Robinson, strong second.
Okay, perfect. We have a nomination and a strong second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I vote aye.
Can I abstain?
You can't.
If you abstain, you can.
Haley Lyons, abstain.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, yay.
Logan Steele, yay.
Yeah, Joe Sullivan, I'll say yay this time. All right, motion passes. Congratulations, Haley.
If I recall, last December, I was like, I'm not continuing on the board.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
It's gonna take a moment.
Never
Not
disappeared.
continuing to be chair.
Here.
And that's a
I'm
I was
here.
gonna ask you
And
that during break.
up
How did
here.
we-
Get here.
that is a big swing. All right, so we have two more.
And I'm very grateful. Thank you, Haley.
We have two more positions here, both so we'll just go right to vice chair and then treasurer. I mean, we have two outstanding people in those positions.
I'd like to nominate Raul Yuan as vice chair.
Name?
No, Jason Robinson, nominated vice chair.
Earl, are you good?
I accept the nomination.
Okay.
I accept the nomination.
We have a second.
Haley Lyons, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. We'll do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I recuse myself. That's the.
Yeah.
Haley Lyons, I.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, yay.
Sullivan, yay. Right. Final position would be for treasurer. Jason, you've served in that and done an awesome job the past couple of years. So you mind continuing on or?
I don't mind.
Okay, anyone else looking or is that?
It's shaking his head no.
I'm just gonna keep my eyes looking down.
This is when he goes off camera.
All right, do I have any motions then?
Haley Lyons, I nominate Jason Robinson for treasurer.
Megan Hartley, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any. Do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I vote aye.
Haley Lyons, I.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, abstain.
Logan Steele, yay.
Yeah, Joe Sullivan, yay. All right, motion passes. Congratulations. All right, that was easy. Thank you to everyone for that. I think that's essentially outside of going back and doing proposals after we do executive session, would conclude.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make one request to ease the transition to Haley.
Sure.
There is one.
My hand on the gavel.
There's one item pending in Workday for your approval. It's just 2 days off that I'm asking for in January. If you can still go in and do that while you have that power.
Yes.
Because it'll take a little while for all that stuff to transition behind the scenes to Haley.
It was like, wait a second.
You can just go to Barry and have her.
Please, I'm not gonna try to tell Daz how to do Workday approvals. It is such a nightmare to navigate all this stuff, so. So if you don't mind doing those 2 days, the second and the third, the Thursday and the Friday, that would be great. And then we can
Good, 'cause
wait
I
for all
might
the
not
other
approve.
stuff.
Nothing until February, and we can't wait till then. All right, it is now 12:24. I'm going to close executive session and reconvene to public session. It's one of the fastest ever.
She's gonna be like, oh, I'm back.
Yeah, all right, so we can now bring in Sherry here.
Go ahead and wait for Martin and Carrie to rejoin. Sherry joining, or should we just go ahead and get started?
She's packing up, but I think we can get started.
Okay, I'll go ahead and get started. Andrew, are we rolling? We're good. Okay, then roll. All right. This is the Oregon Board of Accountancy on Wednesday, December 18th, 2024 at 12:25 p.m. I am now reconvening the public session of the board after conclusion of a recess that was called for the purpose of conducting executive session. I now need to conduct a new roll call for our records. Joe Sullivan, third chair.
Rob Valdivia, vice chair.
Haley Lyons, board member.
Megan Hartley, board member.
I'm Moffett, BOAC chair.
Jason Robinson, board treasurer.
Jeremiah Leopard, board staff.
Martin Petioni, executive director.
Angie Hunt, board legal counsel.
Andy Barlow, board staff. Quinn Stoddard, board staff.
Sherry McPherson, guest.
Okay, and then I'll just call people on Zoom as I see them. Let's start with Logan.
Logan Steele, board member.
Okay, Amanda?
Amanda Fells, OAA.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. Jane?
Jane Slingsby, guest.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Okay, we're just going to jump right into item number 12, which is motions on cases heard in executive session.
I'll make a motion to, for insufficient evidence for cases 23-022 and 23-023 for OAR 801.
I think you have the wrong numbers.
Do I?
It's
3-2 and 3.
0-0-3-2, 0-3-3.
Okay.
Maybe that's incorrect.
Yeah. I have a line, 022.
Right.
I'm sorry. I remake a motion for insufficient evidence for cases 23-032 and 23-033. Or, yeah, insufficient. Sorry about that.
It was insufficient, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
What is it, the wrong case numbers?
You just reread it.
For the, just for clarification, I believe it's case 23-022 and 23-023.
It's 23-032 and 033. The voting matrix is incorrect.
Okay, that's what I'm looking at.
Okay, that's what I was doing.
Matrix.
Okay,
I double checked the cases, so that's I was like, it's these ones.
Okay,
I'm going off the BOAC chair.
I would too. So.
Okay.
Okay, understood.
One more time?
Yeah, let's do it. One
Yeah,
more time.
start with your name too.
Okay. Jason Robinson. I make a motion for insufficient evidence for cases 23-032 and 23-033.
Haley Lyons, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not hearing any, I'll do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I vote aye.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Joe Sullivan, aye. So motion passes. All right. Looks like we go to the inquiries next here.
Yeah, we'll go off the voting matrix.
Dangerous territory.
Yeah, yes, it is. Okay, Jason Robinson, I make a motion to close inquiry case 2024-1 or I9Q-013.
Haley Lyons, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll do a roll call.
Rob Valdivia, I vote aye.
Haley Lyons, aye.
Megan Hartley, aye.
Jason Robinson, aye.
Logan Steele, aye.
Joe Sullivan, aye. Motion passes. Okay, I think that is it for motions. So I don't think there's anything other than that. So looks like we've covered everything else amazingly in the public session. So I'm going to go ahead and move to item 20. Yeah.
What did you want?
Sorry, was there something?
This here now. Do you want to do the?
February.
We already deferred it to February, but I don't know. I think you.
I'm at 12:30 on the dot.
Let's do it in February.
Okay.
It's February.
Okay.
I think it'll be.
20 seconds.
Okay. And we are looking forward to hearing, actually, we're hearing your praises, senior praises while you were gone, but we've deferred that to February and look forward to hearing it then, which is really only a month and a half.
Absolutely, I'll accept the instant wisdom of the Lord.
Perfect. All right. And with that, I'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting. It is now 12:30 p.m. exactly. And our next meeting, I believe, is Thursday. I think it was it February 4th?
It's February 4th.
February 4th, based on our adjusted calendar. So look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you.
Nice job.
Nice job.
All right.
Woohoo.
Sweet.
Smoke.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.